The first rumble came like distant thunder, a deep baritone growl that vibrated through the asphalt of Route 12. It started as a whisper on the horizon, then swelled into a familiar American anthem, the unmistakable voice of a Harley-Davidson V-twin pushing hard through the Montana twilight. In Pine Ridge, where the mountains stood sentinel over forgotten dreams, that sound meant different things to different people. To tourists, it was local color. To locals, it was just another Tuesday. But to the patrons of Veterans Corner, it was the sound of history approaching at 60 miles per hour. The neon sign outside flickered erratically, bathing the gravel parking lot in pulses of red and blue. The V in Veterans had been out for 3 years, but nobody bothered to fix it. It had become part of the place's character, like the bullet holes in the western wall from '97, or the collection of faded unit patches that lined the ceiling beams. Inside the jukebox played Creedence Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son for the third time that night. Nobody complained. Some songs earned the right to repetition. Behind the scarred oak bar, Catherine Kate Reynolds wiped down glasses with mechanical precision, each movement efficient as a field strip. At 35, her face carried a quiet intensity that didn't match the surroundings, too alert, too measured for a backwater bar in a forgotten corner of Montana. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing a small scar that traced her right jawline like an artist's signature. The regulars knew better than to ask about it. They also knew better than to ask about her time with the 5th Special Forces Group, or how the daughter of Pine Ridge's former sheriff ended up pouring drinks instead of following her father's badge. Some stories weren't meant for casual conversation. She placed another clean glass on the shelf, her movements briefly illuminated by headlights sweeping across the windows as a truck pulled into the lot. Kate's eyes tracked the motion automatically, the way they tracked everything. Entries, exits, potential threats. Old habits from deployments that wouldn't die. "He's late tonight," remarked Old Hank from his permanent stool at the corner. Kate didn't need to ask who. Tuesday nights at 8:15, like clockwork, James Iron Horse Harrison would park his ancient Ford pickup in the same spot, walk 17 steps to the door, and order a single shot of Maker's Mark that he'd nurse for exactly 47 minutes. The only man Kate had ever met who was more regimented than her father had been. "Roads might be slick from the rain," Kate said, though they both knew that wouldn't slow Harrison down. The man had driven through worse than Montana drizzle. The door swung open, bringing with it the scent of pine and rain. The figure that stepped through moved with the careful deliberation of age, masking once fluid grace. At 72, James Harrison stood ramrod straight, his 6-foot frame weathered but unbowed. His silver hair was cropped in a military cut that hadn't changed style since the Carter administration. He wore the same faded leather jacket he'd worn every day since Kate had known him, adorned with 3 items that told his story more eloquently than words. A Ranger tab above his heart, the Purple Heart pinned beneath it, and centered on his chest, a silver star that caught the dim bar light like a forgotten promise. The room shifted subtly when he entered, conversations quieting by half a register, backs straightening unconsciously. Even those who'd never served recognized the aura of quiet authority that clung to him like gunpowder residue. "Evening, Iron Horse," Kate said, already pouring his drink. "Kate." Harrison nodded, his voice a gravel road. "Quiet night." "So far." She slid the whiskey across the bar. "But it's early yet." Harrison's weathered hand closed around the glass, the fingers slightly bent from old breaks that hadn't set quite right. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room once, a quick, practiced sweep that missed nothing, before he took his customary seat at the bar's center, where he could see both the entrance and the rear exit reflected in the mirror behind the liquor bottles. Kate had never asked why he chose that particular spot. She already knew. It was the same reason she kept a Beretta M9 secured under the bar, and why she'd memorized the face of every regular who walked through the door. Some instincts you didn't unlearn. "You're favoring your left side," Harrison observed quietly after his first sip. "Shoulder acting up again." Kate rolled the mentioned joint unconsciously. "Old wounds complain when rain's coming." Harrison nodded. He understood better than most. Barometric pressure. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. They shared a moment of silence, a communion of old pain that needed no elaboration. Kate had taken shrapnel in her shoulder during her third deployment. Harrison had taken a Soviet-made 7.62mm round through his left thigh in Panama, 1989. Different wars, same aftermath. "Thought I might have company tonight," Harrison said after a while, his eyes fixed on some middle distance only he could see. "It's an anniversary of sorts." Kate didn't press. Harrison would tell her or he wouldn't. That was their way. Respect for boundaries, for the spaces between words where the real stories lived. The jukebox shifted to Lynyrd Skynyrd's "Simple Man," and Harrison's fingers tapped a counter-rhythm on the bar top. His wedding ring, still worn 20 years after his wife's passing, clicked softly against the wood. "Panama," he said finally. 34 years ago today. Operation Just Cause." His voice dropped lower. Though there wasn't much justice in it when all was said and done. Kate nodded, sensing the rare opening. Harrison seldom spoke of his Ranger days, and never of Panama specifically. Whatever happened there had carved something essential out of him, leaving behind a hollow that he'd spent 3 decades trying to fill with whiskey and silence. "The 75th?" she asked, knowing his unit. "2nd Battalion." Harrison's eyes remained fixed on the mirror, watching the door. "We dropped into Torrijos International. Textbook Halo insertion. Nothing textbook after that." He took another measured sip of whiskey. The mission parameters were clear. Secure the airfield, neutralize PDF forces, minimal civilian casualties. But missions have a way of evolving once boots hit ground. Kate wiped the bar in slow circles, giving him space to continue or retreat. "We encountered unexpected resistance. Took fire from positions not on our intel briefing. Communications were compromised." His hand tightened almost imperceptibly around the glass. Then came the order to pull back, regroup. Standard procedure. The bar door opened, admitting a young couple who took a booth in the corner. Harrison tracked them without appearing, to then continued. "Except I received reports of a Delta team pinned down 2 clicks east of our position. Off mission, technically speaking. Command ordered us to maintain our withdrawal." Kate could hear what wasn't being said. "But you didn't." Harrison's mouth tightened into a thin line. 8 men. Surrounded. No extraction plan. He met her eyes in the mirror. "Some orders demand disobedience." He fell silent, then rolling the whiskey glass between his palms. Kate didn't push. This was as much as he'd ever revealed about the incident that had earned him both the Silver Star and his discharge from the service he loved. The silence stretched between them, comfortable as old leather, until it was shattered by the distinctive rumble of motorcycles pulling into the lot. Not 1 or 2, but several, their engines a dissonant chorus of aggression. Harrison's posture shifted microscopically. His right hand moved slightly closer to his jacket pocket, where Kate knew he carried a compact Smith & Wesson .38 Chiefs Special. Not strictly legal with his whiskey, but Pine Ridge's current sheriff had a selective memory regarding certain veterans and their habits. "Black Serpents," Kate said quietly, recognizing the engine notes. "Victor Crane and his crew." Harrison's face remained impassive, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "How many?" "From the sound, maybe 6, 7 bikes. The door swung open with unnecessary force, and the atmosphere in the bar congealed like old blood. Victor Crane entered first, 6'2" of prison muscle and calculated intimidation. At 45, his face carried the topography of poor choices, a broken nose that had healed crooked, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and eyes that had witnessed violence so often they now expected nothing else. Behind him filed 5 more men, each wearing the Black Serpent's colors, a coiled black snake on a field of crimson poised to strike. They moved with the synchronized swagger of men accustomed to being feared. Crane surveyed the room with theatrical slowness, a predator assessing prey, before his gaze locked onto Harrison. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, then a slow spreading smile that never reached his eyes. "Well now," he drawled, stalking toward the bar, "if it ain't the legendary Sergeant Harrison, the military's finest turncoat." Harrison didn't respond, didn't even turn. He simply took another sip of his whiskey eyes, meeting Crane's in the mirror with glacial indifference. Kate straightened hands flat on the bar. "Evening, Victor. What can I get you, boys?" Crane ignored her, circling to face Harrison directly. "You know my old man talked about you. All those years in Leavenworth, he had plenty of time to tell me how you sold him out. Put him away for 20 years, on your word alone." Now Harrison turned his movements deliberate as a rifle bolt cycling. "Your father was running guns to cartel enforcers, Crane. American servicemen died because of those weapons." He put himself away. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other patrons shifted uneasily, some discreetly making their way toward the exits. Only old Hank remained rooted to his stool, his rheumy eyes suddenly sharp. Crane leaned in, invading Harrison's space. "That's not how he told it. Said you were taking payoffs, same as him, then got cold feet, turned state's evidence to save your own skin." Harrison's expression remained unchanged, but Kate saw his trigger finger straighten against the bar. A veteran's tell the body, preparing for action, while the mind still deliberated. "Your father was a liar as well as a traitor," Harrison said evenly. "The court transcripts are public record. Maybe you should read them sometime." One of Crane's crew laughed, a harsh bark quickly silenced by a glare from his leader. "Brave words from an old man," Crane said, his voice dropping dangerously, his eyes fixed on the silver star pinned to Harrison's jacket. "That's a pretty piece of tin. What did they give it to you for following orders or disobeying them?" Harrison didn't answer, but something ancient and dangerous stirred behind his eyes. Crane reached out suddenly, fingers closing around the metal. "Maybe I should take it since my daddy paid the price for your supposed heroism." The movement was so fast that later witnesses would disagree on exactly what happened. One moment Crane was pawing at Harrison's medal. The next, Kate had vaulted over the bar and locked Crane's arm in a textbook, Kimura hold, hyperextending the joint to the edge of dislocation. "That medal stays where it is," she said, her voice deadly quiet, "and you're going to apologize to the sergeant." The bar froze in collective shock. Crane's crew tensed hands, moving toward concealed weapons, but Kate's grip tightened fractionally, causing Crane to gasp as pressure increased on his shoulder joint. "Easy now," she continued, her tone conversational, despite the violence implicit in her hold. "Your rotator cuff is about 3 pounds of pressure from tearing. I've had medical training. I know exactly how much force to apply." "You crazy bitch," Crane hissed through clenched teeth. "Do you know who we are?" "Black Serpent's Motorcycle Club," Kate replied calmly. "Previously affiliated with the Pagans until a disagreement in 2019. Currently running methamphetamine through 3 counties and engaged in territory disputes with the Outlaws MC. Did I miss anything important? The precision of her intelligence assessment clearly rattled Crane. His eyes darted to his crew, silently ordering them to stand down for the moment. "Let him go, Kate," Harrison said quietly. "Not worth the paperwork." After a heartbeat's hesitation, Kate released the hold, stepping back smoothly, hands raised to show she was standing down. Crane rotated his shoulder, fury and humiliation burning in his eyes. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he snarled. "Both of you." Harrison stood slowly, his movements measured and precise. Despite his 72 years, he suddenly seemed to fill more space than should have been physically possible. "Walk away, Victor," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the now silent bar. "Your father already lost everything to a poor decision. Don't follow his path." Crane's face contorted with rage. "You think I'm scared of a washed-up old man and his pet bartender? I've got 30 brothers who'd love to decorate this place with your insides." He reached inside his jacket and Kate tensed, preparing to move, but Crane merely withdrew a cell phone. With a venomous smile, he began dialing. "Boys," he said into the phone, eyes locked on Harrison, "get everyone. Veterans Corner, now." He paused, listening. "Yes, everyone. We're teaching a history lesson tonight." As he pocketed the phone, the smile widened. 20 minutes. That's how long you have to make peace with whatever God you believe in, old man." Harrison hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. "I made my peace long ago, son. Can't say the same for you." Kate moved closer to Harrison, standing shoulder to shoulder with the old soldier. The few remaining patrons were now openly fleeing the young couple from earlier, practically running for their car. Only old Hank remained silently watching from his corner. "You should go, Hank," Kate called over. "This isn't your fight." The old man shook his head stubbornly. "Ain't running from the likes of them. Not at my age." Crane laughed an ugly sound. "Loyal to the end. That's cute." He gestured to his crew. "Secure the exits. Nobody leaves until our brothers arrive." 2 of his men moved to block the front door, while 2 more headed toward the rear. The remaining biker stood beside Crane, hand resting ostentatiously on a bulge beneath his jacket. Kate's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds entry points, potential weapons. The Beretta under the bar was within reach, but using it would escalate the situation beyond recovery. Harrison could handle himself. His age belied a lifetime of combat training. But against 30 armed bikers, the math was brutally simple. Crane leaned against the bar, savoring his perceived victory. "While we wait for the party to start, why don't you tell us the real story behind that metal Harrison? I bet it's not the hero tale they printed in the papers." Harrison remained silent, his eyes fixed on some middle distance as if Crane wasn't worth his attention. "What's wrong?" "Cat got your tongue," Crane pressed. "Or maybe you're not so proud of what you did to earn it." "The medal speaks for itself," Kate interjected, hoping to divert Crane's focus. Crane's smile turned cruel. "Does it? My sources tell a different story. That you disobeyed direct orders. That men died because of your cowboy heroics." A muscle twitched in Harrison's jaw, barely perceptible, but Kate caught it. Crane had touched a nerve. "You don't know what you're talking about," Harrison said finally, his voice low. "Don't I?" Crane leaned closer. "December 20th, 1989, Panama City. Your unit was ordered to withdraw from Torrijos International. Instead, you took a squad east against direct orders, allegedly to rescue a Delta team." His smile widened at Harrison's carefully masked surprise. "Oh yes, I've done my homework. My father might be in prison, but he still has friends in interesting places." Harrison's expression remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. "The official story says you saved 8 men that night," Crane continued. "The unofficial story says your little rescue mission compromised operational security and cost the lives of 4 Rangers from another company. That your Silver Star was a political move to avoid scandal." He tilted his head. "Which version is true, I wonder?" The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken violence. Kate subtly shifted her weight, preparing to move if necessary. "You weren't there," Harrison said finally, each word precisely measured. "You don't get to judge what happened." "Maybe not," Crane conceded with mock graciousness. "But I do get to judge what happens next." He reached out suddenly and snatched the Silver Star from Harrison's jacket, the pin tearing through the aged leather. Harrison moved with surprising speed, his hand closing around Crane's wrist, but the younger man twisted away, backing up several steps with the medal clutched in his fist. "Give it back," Harrison said, and something in his voice, a quiet, deadly certainty, made even Crane hesitate momentarily. "Make me, old man," Crane taunted, recovering his bravado. He held the medal up to the light. "What's this worth, anyway? The silver content alone." He never finished the sentence. The sound hit them first. A low, rolling thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The glasses behind the bar began to vibrate. Then the bottles, then the entire building itself seemed to tremble with the approaching roar. Kate recognized it immediately. Not the harsh, aggressive notes of modern sport bikes or the staccato rhythm of metric cruisers. This was old American iron, the distinctive percussion of vintage Harley-Davidson V-twins, dozens of them approaching in formation. Crane's smile faltered. His crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Your boys got here quick," Harrison observed mildly, though Kate knew that whatever was approaching wasn't Black Serpent's reinforcements. The sound swelled to a physical presence, vibrating through the floorboards, rattling the windows in their frames. The parking lot suddenly blazed with headlights, not the scattered arrangement of a casual arrival, but the disciplined formation of a military convoy. One of Crane's men rushed back from the front door, his face pale. "Boss, you need to see this." Crane moved to the window, Kate and Harrison following at a careful distance. What they saw made even Kate's breath catch. The parking lot and street beyond were filled with motorcycles, not the modern machines favored by the Black Serpents, but vintage Harleys spanning decades of American engineering. Panheads from the 50s and 60s, shovel heads from the 70s, Evolution engines from the 80s and early 90s, a rolling museum of motorcycle history arranged with military precision around the building. Riders sat astride their machines, faces obscured by helmets' leather cuts, displaying a patch Kate recognized immediately. The Freedom Riders MC one of the oldest and most respected veterans motorcycle clubs in the country. "Jesus Christ," Crane muttered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "There must be 60 of them." 62, Harrison corrected quietly. Standard platoon formation with reconnaissance elements. As they watched the riders kill their engines in perfect synchronization, the sudden silence more intimidating than the noise had been. One rider dismounted from a meticulously maintained 1980 FLT Tour Glide. The machine's black paint immaculate, its chrome gleaming even in the dim parking lot lights. The rider removed his helmet, revealing a man in his mid-60s with a silver-shot beard and the lean, hard physique of someone who had never stopped training. Across the back of his leather, cut above the Freedom Rider's patch, was a single word embroidered in silver thread: Ghost. "Michael Daniels," Harrison breathed, and Kate heard something she'd never detected in his voice before. Uncertainty. "Who?" Crane demanded, trying to mask his growing apprehension. "Michael Ghost Daniels," Kate explained, her eyes never leaving the approaching figure. former Delta Force operator, one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in American history. Daniel strode toward the bar entrance with the measured pace of a man who had never needed to hurry, who understood that true power moved at its own speed. The black serpents guarding the door stepped aside without a word, instinctively recognizing a predator far higher on the food chain. The door swung open, and Daniels stepped inside his presence, immediately dominating the room. His eyes, sharp as rifle sights despite his age, scanned the interior once before locking onto Harrison. For a long moment, neither man spoke. It was Daniels who finally broke the silence. 34 years, he said, his voice a graveled baritone. I've been looking for you for 34 years, Iron Horse. Harrison straightened almost imperceptibly. Wasn't hiding ghost. The hell you weren't. Daniels took another step forward. Changed your records. Moved 5 times in 10 years. No digital footprint. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Took me calling in favors from 3 alphabet agencies to track you down. Harrison didn't deny it. Had my reasons. Always do, don't you? Daniels replied, but there was no accusation in his tone, only a weary understanding. Crane, sensing the dynamic shifting away from him, attempted to reassert control. This is touching, really, but we've got business here that doesn't concern you or your little riding club. Daniels didn't even glance in his direction. I wasn't talking to you, son. Don't son me, old man, Crane snarled, emboldened by Daniels' seeming dismissal. You and your geriatric biker gang don't scare me. My brothers are on their way, and when they get here... Now Daniels turned, fixing Crane with a stare that had once made hardened terrorists reconsider their life choices. Your brothers just encountered a roadblock of Pike County deputies on Route 12. Seems there was an anonymous tip about drug trafficking. They'll be delayed. Indefinitely. The blood drained from Crane's face, but he rallied quickly. This isn't over. Nobody crosses the black serpents. Son. Daniels said the word somehow conveying both pity and menace. You crossed us the moment you put your hands on that medal. He nodded toward the silver star still clutched in Crane's fist. Now put it down before I take personal offense. Something in his quiet tone, the absolute certainty of capability, made Crane hesitate. His eyes darted between Daniels Harrison and the door, calculating odds that were rapidly deteriorating. This isn't your fight, he tried once more. Daniels took another step forward. That's where you're wrong. You see that man? He pointed to Harrison without taking his eyes off Crane. That's not just some random veteran you decided to harass. That's Sergeant James Iron Horse Harrison, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. He paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest. 34 years ago today, in the jungles of Panama, our Delta unit was ambushed 4 miles east of Torrijos International. Communication was jammed. Extraction impossible. Enemy forces closing in. His eyes burned with the memory. We were dead men walking. Command wrote us off as acceptable losses. Another step closer to Crane, who now seemed frozen in place. Then, through the rain and the gunfire, came Harrison and his Rangers, against direct orders, risking court-martial. They fought through to our position, established a defensive perimeter, and Harrison personally carried me over 4 miles of jungle terrain after I took rounds through both legs. Daniels was now close enough to touch Crane, though he made no move to do so. 8 Delta operators came home that night instead of going home in boxes. 8 men got to see their families again because one Ranger sergeant decided that "Leave no man behind" wasn't just a slogan. The bar had fallen completely silent. Even old Hank seemed to be holding his breath. "So, you see," Daniels continued, his voice dangerously soft, "when you put your hands on that medal, the medal he earned saving my life and the lives of my brothers, you made it very much my fight." Crane swallowed hard, his earlier bravado evaporating under Daniels's unwavering stare. Slowly, reluctantly, he opened his hand, allowing the silver star to drop onto the bar top. "Smart choice," Daniels said. He turned back to Harrison, the hard edges of his demeanor softening almost imperceptibly. "Been a long time, Iron Horse." Harrison nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Too long, Ghost." Kate watched the exchange with growing understanding. The pieces were falling into place. Harrison's reticence about his service, his isolation, the shadows that sometimes crossed his features when he thought no one was watching. Daniels gestured toward the door. "Got about 60 old warhorses out there who'd like to shake your hand if you're amenable. Men who know the real story, not the official version." For the first time that night, something like uncertainty crossed Harrison's face. "I'm not the man they think I am, Ghost. The things they don't know." "They know enough," Daniels interrupted gently. "They know you're the reason I'm still breathing. The reason any of us are." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a faded photograph, sliding it across the bar. Kate glimpsed 8 men in Delta Force insignia, arms around each other's shoulders, jungle backdrop behind them. A 9th figure stood slightly apart, a ranger sergeant, with Harrison's unmistakable bearing. "Panama, December 21st, 1989, Daniels said. "The morning after. Last photo of the team before we were evacuated." Harrison stared at the photograph, something raw and vulnerable passing across his features before he masked it again. "You carried more than just me out of that jungle, Harrison," Daniels continued. "You carried the weight of your decision, the consequences. For 34 years, you've been carrying it alone." He nodded toward the door. "Time to put it down, brother. Time to come home." Harrison's hand hovered over the photograph, not quite touching it, as if afraid it might dissolve into smoke. "There were costs," he said quietly. "Men who didn't make it back because I diverted resources." "That's war," Daniels replied simply. "Always costs. Question is whether you can live with the choice you made." "I've been trying to for 3 decades. Alone," Daniels pointed out. "That ends tonight." A tense silence filled the room as Harrison wrestled with ghosts only he could see. Finally, he reached for the silver star, pinning it back onto his jacket with careful precision. "If I step outside," he said slowly, "if I face those men, I need them to know the whole truth. Not just the parts that make me a hero." Daniels nodded solemnly. "Truth's all any of us have left in the end." The moment was shattered by Crane's harsh laugh. "This is touching, really. The band of brothers reunited at last." His hand moved to his waistband, withdrawing a snub-nosed .38 revolver. "Unfortunately, I can't let you walk out of here with my reputation in tatters." Kate tensed, calculating the distance to the Beretta under the bar, knowing she wouldn't reach it in time. Harrison stood perfectly still, his eyes on Crane's trigger finger rather than the gun itself, a professional's focus. Daniels didn't even turn around. "I wouldn't," he said calmly. "Wouldn't what?" Crane sneered, the gun steady in his hand. "Pull that trigger," Daniels clarified. "Because while you've been focused on us, you failed to notice that 3 of my men entered through the kitchen door 90 seconds ago. One is now 6 feet behind you with an M1911 pointed at the base of your skull. The other 2 have your crew covered." Now Crane's eyes darted frantically around, confirming Daniels's claim, as he spotted two freedom riders standing behind his men, weapons drawn. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "Feel the pressure on your spine?" Daniels asked conversationally. "That's a .45 caliber barrel. One twitch of a finger, and they'll be cleaning pieces of you off the ceiling." Sweat beaded on Crane's forehead as he felt the unmistakable pressure of a gun barrel against his back. His hand trembled slightly. "Drop it," came a new voice from behind him. Cold, professional, belonging to a man accustomed to giving orders that were obeyed. After a long, tense moment, Crane's fingers opened, allowing the revolver to clatter onto the floor. One of the Freedom Riders kicked it away, while the others efficiently disarmed the remaining black serpents. "Smart choice," Daniels repeated, finally turning to face Crane. "Now, I'm going to make you an offer. You and your crew are going to walk out of here. You're going to get on your bikes and ride straight out of town. You're not going to stop until you hit the state line. And you're never going to come back to Pine Ridge as long as you live." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant for Crane alone. "Because if you do, if I ever hear that you've set foot in this town again or bothered these people, I will personally ensure that every veterans motorcycle club in the country knows your name and face. There will be nowhere to hide, no road you can ride that we won't find you. Do we understand each other?" The color had drained completely from Crane's face. He nodded once, jerkily. "Good." Daniels stepped back. "Now get out of my sight." The black serpents wasted no time practically scrambling toward the exit. At the door, Crane paused, looking back at Harrison with naked hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over, old man," he spat. "Not by a long shot." Harrison met his gaze steadily. "Yes, son, it is. You just don't know it yet." After the black serpents had departed, roaring away into the night with considerably less bravado than they'd arrived, Daniels turned back to Harrison. "That boy's going to be a problem," he observed. Harrison shrugged slightly. "Problems I can handle. It's the ghosts that keep me up at night." Daniels's expression softened with understanding. "Then let's exorcise some of those ghosts, shall we?" He gestured toward the door. "Your brothers are waiting." Kate watched as something shifted in Harrison's demeanor. A subtle squaring of the shoulders, a straightening of the spine as if preparing to face a firing squad with dignity. "Kate," he said, turning to her, "thank you for standing up for an old soldier." She shook her head. "Just did what needed doing, Sergeant." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Always the soldier's answer." He hesitated. "I may be a while. Don't hold my stool." "It'll be here when you get back," she promised. Harrison nodded once, then turned to follow Daniels toward the door. As they reached it, Daniels suddenly stopped, his attention caught by something on the wall, the faded photograph of Pine Ridge's Sheriff's Department, circa 2005. "Wait," he said, moving closer to the picture. His finger traced over one face, a tall, broad-shouldered man with Kate's determined jaw and watchful eyes. "Sheriff Thomas Reynolds." He turned to Kate with new intensity. "You're Tom Reynolds' daughter." Kate stiffened slightly. "Yes, he was my father." Daniel stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Tom Reynolds," he repeated, something like awe in his voice. "He was there, in Panama." Harrison's head snapped up. "What?" "Not with Delta," Daniels clarified. "He was Army intelligence attached to our unit for the operation. He was one of the 8 men you saved that night." A shocked silence fell over the bar. Kate felt as if the floor had suddenly tilted beneath her feet. "That's not possible," she said, her voice hardly more than a whisper. "He never mentioned Panama. Never said anything about—" But even as she spoke, memories were realigning in her mind. Her father's inexplicable respect whenever Harrison's name was mentioned, his insistence that she take the job at Veterans Corner despite her qualifications for more prestigious positions, the way he'd sometimes wake shouting in Spanish during the dark hours before dawn. Daniels reached into his jacket again, withdrawing the photograph he'd shown earlier. He placed it on the bar, his finger indicating a figure in the background Kate hadn't noticed before. A younger version of her father standing slightly apart from the Delta operators, but unmistakably present. "Tom Reynolds," Daniels confirmed. "Intelligence officer. He coordinated our extraction after Harrison reached us. Saved all our asses with his Spanish when we hit a civilian checkpoint." Kate stared at the photograph, her world reshaping itself around this new reality. All these years, Harrison had been quietly watching over her, not just as her father's friend, but as the man who had saved her father's life. "He never told me," she said, looking up at Harrison with new eyes. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" Harrison's face was a study in controlled emotion. "Classified operation. We weren't supposed to talk about it. And later, there were complications, politics, careers ended. Your father was one of the few who escaped the fallout. Because of you," Daniels interjected. "You took the hit for all of us." Kate's mind was racing, connecting dots that had been there all along. "The discharge, your benefits being denied. That was the price you paid." Harrison looked away. "Small price for doing the right thing." Daniels placed a hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Not so small, and not forgotten." He turned back to Kate. "Your father was a good man. He never forgot what Harrison did for us. Used to write to me every year on the anniversary. December 20th. Kate whispered, the significance of the date suddenly clear. Her father had always been somber on that day, would sit alone with a bottle of whiskey and stare at nothing for hours. Daniels nodded. He never broke classification, but he kept the brotherhood alive in his own way. He studied her face carefully. "You have his eyes. Same look in them, too. Like you're calculating exit strategies even in casual conversation." She didn't deny it. It was an accurate assessment. "Did he ever mention the Freedom Riders to you?" Daniels asked. Kate shook her head. "Never, not once." "Interesting," Daniels mused, "because he was one of our founding members. Charter member number 8. The revelation hit Kate like a physical blow. Her straight-laced, by-the-book father, a member of an outlaw motorcycle club. It seemed impossible, yet it explained so much: his unexpected friendships with certain rough-looking men who would visit occasionally, the mysterious weekend trips he would take twice a year, the locked box in his study that she'd never been able to open after his death. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why keep all this secret? Why didn't he ever tell me about any of it?" Harrison and Daniels exchanged a look, heavy with unspoken communication. "Panama wasn't just a military operation gone sideways," Harrison said carefully. "There were complications. Things happened that never made the official reports." "What things?" Kate pressed. Daniels sighed heavily. "That's a conversation for later, when we have more privacy." He glanced meaningfully around the bar, where even old Hank was listening intently now. "But your father was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. We all made that choice, to bury certain aspects of what happened that night." "Until tonight," Harrison added quietly. Daniels nodded grimly. "Until tonight." He turned back to Kate. "Your father would have been here, you know, for the reunion. He never missed an anniversary until his accident 3 years ago." Kate finished the words, feeling strange in her mouth. She'd never questioned the single vehicle crash that had taken her father's life. A deer on a rainy road, the official report had said. But now, with everything else being called into question, Was it really an accident? She asked the question directed at both men. Again, that loaded glance between them. We should take this conversation elsewhere, Daniels said finally. Too many ears here. Harrison nodded agreement, then turned to Kate. You should come with us. There are things you need to know, things your father would have wanted you to know eventually. Kate hesitated, torn between professional responsibility and the sudden burning need to understand the mysteries that had just been laid at her feet. Go, said old Hank from his corner, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. I'll watch the place. Not like we'll be busy after all this excitement. After a moment's consideration, Kate nodded. Let me get my jacket. As she retrieved her coat from behind the bar, her hand brushed against the beretta. After a brief hesitation, she secured it in her shoulder holster, concealed beneath the leather jacket. Whatever revelations awaited her outside, she had learned long ago to be prepared for any contingency. Harrison watched her with knowing eyes, but said nothing. Some lessons transcended generations. Together, the three of them moved toward the door. Harrison, walking with the measured pace of a man facing long-delayed judgment, Daniels with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect, and Kate with the wary alertness of a woman whose world had just been turned upside down. As they stepped outside, the 62 Freedom Riders snapped to attention as one, a gesture of respect that brought a visible lump to Harrison's throat. These were men who understood sacrifice, who had lived by the same code that had guided his fateful decision 34 years ago. Brothers, Daniels called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. I want to introduce you to the man we've been searching for all these years, the ranger who defied orders and saved 8 of our brothers in Panama. He placed a hand on Harrison's shoulder. This isn't just a veteran, he announced, his voice thick with emotion. This is the man who carried me through 4 miles of jungle with enemy fire all around us. The man who risked everything, his career, his freedom, his life, because he believed that no one gets left behind. A murmur ran through the assembled riders. I've spent 3 decades looking for him, Daniels continued. 3 decades waiting to say 2 words that have been too long in coming. Thank you. As if on cue, the Freedom Riders saluted as one. Not the casual civilian approximation, but the precise military salute of men who had earned the right to render it. Harrison stood frozen for a moment, clearly overwhelmed by the display. Then, slowly, with the dignity that had carried him through war and peace, triumph and disgrace, he returned the salute. The honor was mine, he said simply, his voice carrying in the hushed night. Then and now. Kate watched the exchange with a strange mixture of pride and apprehension. This was a side of Harrison she had never seen. The decorated ranger, the reluctant hero, the man her father had apparently owed his life to. Yet beneath the moment of recognition, she sensed currents of something darker, unresolved tensions that had brought these men together after decades of silence. As the salutes were lowered, Daniels turned to her. Tom's daughter, he announced, and another murmur ran through the crowd, this one tinged with surprise and what sounded almost like concern. She doesn't know yet, Daniels added, and the gathered veterans exchanged glances laden with meaning Kate couldn't decipher. Doesn't know what? She asked, her patience wearing thin with half-revealed truths. Harrison and Daniels shared another look before Harrison spoke. The real reason your father never told you about Panama, he said quietly. The reason he kept his connection to the Freedom Riders secret from you. The reason he spent the last years of his life looking over his shoulder. Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana night. What reason? She demanded. Harrison's weathered hand moved to the silver star on his chest fingers, tracing its outline as if drawing strength from it. Because what happened in Panama didn't stay in Panama, he said finally, because some secrets don't remain buried forever. He looked out at the assembled riders, then back to Kate, his eyes holding the weight of 3 decades of silence. Your father wasn't killed in an accident, Kate. He was silenced. And now that the Freedom Riders have found me after all these years, whoever killed him will be coming for us next. The night seemed to hold its breath around them, 62 engines silent, 62 veterans standing witness to a truth finally spoken aloud after 34 years of dangerous silence. In that moment, as the implications of Harrison's words sank in, Kate Reynolds understood that the rumble of motorcycles that had begun this night was merely prelude, the first distant roll of thunder before a storm. 3 decades in the making finally broke over Pine Ridge, Montana. A storm centered on a silver star, a long-ago jungle firefight, and secrets worth killing to protect. The Freedom Riders Clubhouse stood 10 miles outside Pine Ridge, a converted barn set back from the highway on 20 acres of Montana wilderness. Its weathered timber walls had witnessed 3 decades of veteran gatherings, from solemn remembrances to raucous celebrations of survival. Tonight, it hosted a reunion 34 years overdue. Vintage Harleys lined the gravel drive in perfect formation, a mechanical honor guard for the man whose actions had rippled across decades. The machines gleamed under security lights chrome, reflecting like mirrors against the night, each bike positioned with military precision. Inside the main room hummed with controlled tension. Old soldiers stood in small groups, their postures revealing combat experience more clearly than the service patches on their leather cuts. They maintained tactical awareness, even in supposed safety, a habit that never died. Eyes tracked entrances and exits, bodies positioned for optimal response to threats. Conversations conducted in the measured tones of men accustomed to being heard the first time. In the center of it all stood James Harrison Silver Star, restored to his jacket, surrounded by the men he had saved in Panama, and those who had heard the legend over decades of Freedom Riders gatherings. Kate Reynolds observed from the periphery, nursing a cup of coffee as she processed the seismic revelations of the night. Her father, the straight arrow sheriff who'd preached law and order, had been part of this brotherhood, had shared their secrets, had died, perhaps, protecting them. Michael "Ghost" Daniels approached, moving with the smooth economy of motion that marked career operators. Despite his 65 years, he retained the physical presence of a much younger man. His silver-shot beard framed features that had stared death in the face across multiple continents, yet his eyes carried something Kate recognized, the same haunted vigilance she sometimes glimpsed in her own reflection. "How you holding up?" he asked, voice pitched low beneath the ambient conversation. "Processing," Kate replied honestly. "It's a lot to take in." Daniels nodded toward Harrison, who was deep in conversation with 3 Freedom Riders. He never wanted recognition, never wanted to be found. The real heroes rarely do. Why keep looking then? 34 years is a long hunt. Some debts can't be repaid. Daniels rolled up his right sleeve, revealing a mass of scar tissue that mapped his forearm. But they deserve acknowledgement. I took 7 rounds that night in Panama. Should have bled out in the mud. Harrison carried me through 4 miles of jungle with his own shoulder shot through. His eyes never left the old ranger. Man like that deserves to know his sacrifice wasn't forgotten. Before Kate could respond, the clubhouse door swung open. A Freedom Rider entered briskly, making a beeline for Daniels. He whispered something urgent, and Daniels's expression hardened. "Gather round," he called, his voice cutting through conversations with natural command authority. The veterans responded instantly, decades-old training overriding civilian habits. "We've got company," Daniels announced. "Black serpents, at least 30 bikes just turned onto our access road." Harrison's face remained impassive, but Kate caught the slight adjustment in his stance, weight shifting to the balls of his feet. Right hand unconsciously moving toward the pocket that held his .38 Chiefs Special. "So much for state lines," one of the riders muttered. "Crane couldn't resist a final play," Harrison observed quietly. "Too much pride at stake." Daniels nodded. "Two options. We can either lock down and prepare for trouble, or meet them head-on," finished a tall rider with a USMC Force Recon patch. "On our terms, not theirs." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled veterans. These were not men who waited passively for trouble to find them. "Formation Delta," Daniels decided, and the group began moving with practiced efficiency. Kate watched impressed, despite her concern, as the Freedom Riders assumed defensive positions around the clubhouse. They moved without discussion, years of shared experience, making words unnecessary. "Standard perimeter overlapping fields of fire," Harrison commented, noting Kate's observation. "Military formation adapted for civilian terrain." The technical precision was remarkable. Veterans took positions at windows and doorways, maintaining sightlines that covered every approach angle. Others moved vehicles to create choke points on the access road. Communication was minimal hand signals replacing verbal orders. "Your father helped develop these protocols," Daniels told Kate. "Combined his law enforcement experience with our military training. Created a defensive doctrine that kept us secure without crossing legal lines." The revelation was another piece in the expanding puzzle of Thomas Reynolds' sheriff veteran Freedom Rider. A man with far more dimensions than Kate had ever suspected. "You should stay inside," Harrison told her, the command implicit in his tone. Kate raised an eyebrow. "I've been in firefights before, Sergeant. 2 tours in Afghanistan." "This isn't Afghanistan," Harrison replied evenly. "This is personal." Before she could argue further, the distant rumble of motorcycles grew audible. Not the disciplined formation of the Freedom Riders, but the aggressive cacophony of riders with something to prove. The black serpents appeared at the access road headlights, cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. They slowed at the sight of the clubhouse and the line of Freedom Riders standing in tactical formation across the gravel drive. Daniels stepped forward, positioning himself centrally. Harrison moved to his right with another senior rider, a former Navy SEAL, judging by his insignia flanking his left. The 3 men stood unmoving as the black serpents approached, veterans of real wars facing weekend warriors playing at being outlaws. Victor Crane led the pack, his Road King's custom pipes shattering the night with deliberate provocation. He killed the engine 20 yards from the Freedom Riders' line, his crew following suit. The sudden silence carried more tension than the noise had. "Told you, this wasn't over, old man," Crane called, dismounting with theatrical slowness. His eyes scanned the defensive formation, taking in the disciplined arrangement of the veterans. For a brief moment, uncertainty flashed across his features before arrogance reasserted itself. "Private property," Daniels responded calmly. "You're trespassing." Crane laughed, the sound brittle in the tense air. "Just making a social call. Thought we'd continue our conversation from the bar." His hand rested conspicuously on his waistband, where the outline of a weapon was visible beneath his cut. "Nothing left to discuss," Harrison said, his voice carrying easily despite its low register. "You made your choice when you ignored the warning to leave town." "Warnings don't mean much coming from senior citizens," Crane sneered, though Kate noted the nervous glances exchanged among his crew. The black serpents had expected intimidation to carry the moment, not the cold professionalism facing them. Daniels stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "Last chance to ride away, son. Next time won't be a suggestion." Crane's face darkened. "You think I'm scared of you, of any of you?" He gestured expansively at the Freedom Riders. "Look at yourselves. Old men playing soldier living in the past. This isn't your world anymore." "No," Harrison agreed quietly. "It's not our world, but it's still our fight." Something in his tone, the absolute certainty, the calm readiness finally penetrated Crane's bravado. He glanced at his crew, noting their growing unease as they registered the tactical disadvantage they faced. The Freedom Riders weren't posturing or posing. They were deployed, each man covering specific sectors, hands resting near concealed weapons. This wasn't the amateur confrontation Crane had anticipated. These men had faced real combat, real consequences. The difference was becoming painfully apparent. "You should have stayed forgotten, Harrison," Crane said, his voice losing some of its bluster. "Now everyone has to pay." He reached for his weapon, but before he could draw, the sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching. Daniels smiled thinly. "Right on time?" "You called the cops?" Crane spat incredulously. "No," Daniels replied. "We called the sheriff. Different thing entirely in Pine Ridge." The lead patrol car skidded to a halt behind the Black Serpent's formation. Sheriff Dawson stepped out, hand resting on his service weapon, expression hard beneath his Stetson. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the flat certainty of rural law enforcement. "Getting reports of a disturbance. Care to explain why you're on private property after being warned to leave town?" Crane's face contorted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he hissed at Harrison. "Actually," Sheriff Dawson cut in, "it is. Victor Crane, you're under arrest for parole violation. Being in possession of a firearm violates the terms of your release." He nodded toward the visible weapon outline. "Your PO in Billings sends his regards." The Black Serpents shifted nervously as 3 more patrol cars arrived, deputies emerging with hands on their service weapons. "The rest of you have exactly 2 minutes to get back on your bikes and ride out of my county," Dawson continued. "After that, we start checking registration, insurance, blood alcohol, and whatever else seems interesting." The sheriff's calm authority broke the spell. Without their leader, the Black Serpent's unity crumbled. They mounted their bikes with mumbled threats and revving engines, a chaotic retreat that contrasted sharply with their aggressive arrival. As deputies cuffed Crane and led him to a patrol car, Dawson approached the Freedom Riders' line. "Michael," he nodded to Daniels, "keeping interesting company these days." "Sheriff," Daniels returned evenly. "Appreciate the timely response." "Tom Reynolds was my mentor," Dawson said simply. "I pay my debts." His eyes shifted to Harrison, recognition flickering in them. "Sergeant Harrison, been a while." Harrison nodded once. "Sheriff?" Dawson turned to Kate, his expression softening slightly. "Kate, your father would have been right in the middle of this." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Actually, he probably orchestrated it from wherever he is." Kate studied the sheriff with new awareness. "You knew, didn't you, about Dad? About all of this?" "Some," Dawson admitted. "Not everything. Tom compartmentalized better than anyone I ever met." He glanced at the Freedom Riders. "But I knew enough to answer when these gentlemen called." After the sheriff departed with his prisoner, the veterans maintained their defensive positions until the last Black Serpent taillight disappeared down the highway. Only then did Daniels signal the all-clear, the formation dissolving as men returned to the clubhouse. That went better than expected, Daniels observed, though his eyes remained watchful. Too easy, Harrison nodded. Crane was overconfident, didn't expect coordinated resistance or law enforcement allies. His weathered face showed concern. But he'll have contingencies. Men like him always do. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere had changed. The earlier reunion warmth had been replaced by combat readiness, old instincts reawakened by the confrontation. Time for the full briefing, Daniels announced, leading them toward a back room. Kate should hear everything now. She's earned it. The room they entered was Spartan and functional. A conference table surrounded by mismatched chairs, walls covered with maps and photographs. A Vietnam-era ammo box sat in the center of the table, secured with a combination lock. 7 Freedom Riders joined them, each man carrying the bearing of senior leadership. They took seats with the unconscious precision of men accustomed to military briefings. Daniels remained standing, hands resting on the table's edge. Operation Ghostwalker, he began without preamble. Panama, December 1989. The mission that never officially happened. He nodded to one of the riders who dimmed the lights. Another activated a projector displaying a topographical map of Panama City and surrounding jungle. Most people know about Operation Just Cause, the official invasion to remove Noriega, Daniels continued. What they don't know is that several operations were running concurrently off the books. The projector shifted to black and white reconnaissance photos showing a compound deep in jungle terrain. Intelligence identified this facility as a storage site for evidence connecting certain U.S. officials to Noriega's drug operations. Documents, recordings, account ledgers, proof that some of our own people were profiting from the same criminal activities we were supposedly fighting. Kate leaned forward, absorbing the information with professional focus. This wasn't just history, this was context for her father's death. Our Delta unit was tasked with recovering or destroying this evidence before the main invasion, Daniels continued. High-risk, deniable operation. If captured, we were on our own. He tapped a location on the displayed map. Insertion went sideways from the jump. Intelligence was outdated. What was supposed to be a lightly guarded storage facility turned out to be a fortified compound with at least 30 armed personnel. Harrison picked up the narrative, his voice steady. Ranger Battalion was positioned here. He indicated another location, securing Torrijos International Airport. We monitored Delta's communication frequency as standard procedure, tracking friendly forces in our operational area. We got ambushed 2 clicks from the objective, Daniels said. Walked right into a prepared position. Lost communication with command. Took heavy casualties immediately. The projector shifted to a grainy night vision image showing intense firefight conditions, muzzle flashes, illuminating dense jungle terrain, tracer rounds cutting through darkness. Standard protocol was clear, Harrison continued. In the event of communication failure with Special Operations units, maintain primary mission objectives. Do not divert resources. His eyes met Kate's across the table. I disobeyed that order. He took a squad of Rangers against direct command instructions, Daniels explained. Used terrain knowledge from previous Panama deployments to outflank the ambush position. Hit the enemy from behind while we were pinned down. Another Freedom Rider, a former Delta operator judging by his insignia, leaned forward. Changed the entire tactical situation in under 5 minutes. Turned a slaughter into a fighting chance. Harrison's face remained impassive, but Kate caught the subtle tightening around his eyes, the look of a man revisiting difficult decisions. We extracted all survivors, Harrison said quietly. 8 men, 5 wounded, including your father and Daniels. Established a defensive perimeter, and began egress toward our position at the airport. "What Harrison isn't saying," Daniels interjected, "is that he carried me personally for most of that 4-mile trek. Both my legs were hit. Couldn't walk. He refused to leave me despite the tactical disadvantage." The room fell silent as the weight of that decision settled over them. In combat, carrying a wounded man meant compromising your own survival chances dramatically. "During extraction," Harrison continued after a moment, "we discovered something unexpected. The facility wasn't just storing evidence of past misdeeds. It contained operational plans for future black operations, unauthorized activities using U.S. military resources for private profit." He nodded to Daniels, who unlocked the ammo box and withdrew a weathered document folder. "We recovered this from the site. Insurance policy in case the mission went wrong." Daniels slid the folder toward Kate. "Your father was our intelligence officer. He recognized immediately what we'd found evidence implicating high-ranking officers and officials in a conspiracy that went beyond Noriega." Kate opened the folder, carefully scanning documents that detailed weapons shipments, drug transportation routes, and, most disturbingly, a list of problem assets marked for elimination American personnel who posed security risks to the operation. "Jesus," she whispered, military training helping her grasp the implications immediately. "This is treason," Harrison finished simply, "conducted by men with stars on their shoulders and friends in Washington." "When we returned to base," Daniels continued, "we faced an impossible situation. Report what we'd found and risk immediate silencing by powerful people, or bury it and become complicit ourselves. Your father proposed a third option," Harrison said. "Document everything, create multiple evidence caches, and establish a dead man's switch. If anything happened to any of us, the evidence would automatically go public." Kate looked up sharply. "Did it activate when Dad died?" Daniels shook his head. "The system required confirmation from multiple sources. Your father's death appeared accidental, not enough to trigger the protocol." "It wasn't an accident," Kate stated with certainty. "No," Harrison agreed quietly. "It wasn't, but it was made to look convincing enough that we couldn't activate the failsafe without risking the others." Kate processed this, mind racing through implications. "So the evidence is still secure, still hidden." Harrison's hand moved to the silver star on his chest. "Some of it. To twist 4. The coordinates are on the back of this medal," he said, unpinning it and turning it over. Etched microscopically into the metal were latitude and longitude coordinates followed by an alphanumeric sequence. One of 8 locations. Each survivor carried one piece of the puzzle. Together, they lead to the complete evidence cache. Kate stared at the tiny markings, understanding dawning. "That's why Crane wanted the medal. That's why someone killed Dad." Harrison nodded grimly. "After Panama, I was offered a choice: resignation with silence or court-martial. I chose resignation, thinking I could protect the others by removing myself from the equation." His voice carried decades of regret. "I disappeared, changed locations regularly, minimized my digital footprint. But I always kept the medal." "The conspirators were patient," Daniels added. "They waited years tracking us individually. 3 of our original 8 have died in accidents over the past decade. Your father was the 3rd. "But why now?" Kate asked. "After 34 years, why is this suddenly active again?" "Because the last of the conspirators is positioning for a cabinet appointment," Daniels explained. "General William Hargrove, currently Special Advisor to the Joint Chiefs. Nomination announcement expected within the month. The old evidence could derail everything he's built." Recognition flashed in Kate's eyes. "Hargrove," Dad mentioned that name, "called him 2 weeks before he died." Harrison and Daniels exchanged sharp glances. "Did he say why?" Harrison asked intently. Kate concentrated, accessing the memory. "Just that he needed to close an old account. I assumed it was police business." "It was a warning," Daniels said. "Tom must have learned something new, something that made him reach out to Hargrove directly." "Which signed his death warrant," Harrison concluded grimly. The implications settled heavily around the table. Whatever Thomas Reynolds had discovered had been significant enough to break decades of silence and dangerous enough to get him killed. "What about Crane?" Kate asked. "How does he connect?" "Mercenary," Harrison replied. "Hired muscle probably doesn't know the full scope. His father worked security for some of the conspirators before his incarceration. Family connection makes him reliable and expendable." The tactical analysis was cold but accurate. Victor Crane was a pawn in a much larger game, useful for his willingness to pursue vendettas without asking questions. "So what now?" Kate asked, military pragmatism asserting itself through the emotional turmoil. "What's our play?" Harrison studied her with newfound respect, the daughter of his former brother-in-arms, displaying the same strategic focus that had made Thomas Reynolds invaluable in Panama. "We bring the evidence to light," he said simply. "All of it from all 8 locations, before they can silence anyone else." 5 locations, Daniels corrected grimly. 3 men dead means 3 coordinates lost. "Not necessarily," Harrison countered. "Tom Reynolds was methodical. He would have secured his information, created a backup." Kate's mind raced ahead of the conversation. "His lockbox," she said suddenly. "Dad kept a fireproof safe in his study. I never could open it after he died. No key, no combination." "What happened to it?" Daniels asked intently. "Still at the house. I kept everything after he died. Couldn't bring myself to clear it out." Harrison nodded decisively. "Then that's our first objective. Secure that box." "There's another problem," one of the Freedom Riders interjected. "Crane's arrest is temporary at best. His crew is still out there, and they'll report back to whoever's pulling their strings." "Meaning we're on borrowed time," Daniels concluded. "Hours, not days." Harrison stood, decision made. "Kate and I will retrieve the lockbox. Michael, secure the clubhouse and prepare for possible hostiles. We rendezvous back here at 0300. The military precision of the plan settled the room. These were men accustomed to mission parameters and execution timelines. As the briefing concluded, Kate pulled Harrison aside. "There's something I don't understand. If you've been hiding all these years, why come to Pine Ridge? Why stay so close to Dad?" Harrison's weathered face softened slightly. "Someone had to watch over Tom's daughter. Make sure the past didn't find you." The simple statement hit Kate with unexpected force. All these years, the quiet old veteran at the bar had been her silent guardian, honoring a promise to her father, protecting her from threats she hadn't known existed. "I never needed protection," she said, though without heat. Harrison's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Your father said you'd say exactly that." The almost smile faded. "But everyone needs someone watching their 6 Kate. Even the strongest soldiers." Thomas Reynolds's house stood on 3 acres at the edge of town, a modest ranch-style home surrounded by pine trees. Kate hadn't changed much since his death. The interior remained a testament to a life of disciplined service military memorabilia, sharing space with law enforcement commendations. Harrison moved through the house with quiet respect, noting the similarities to military base housing, functional furniture, practical layout, minimal ornamentation. Thomas Reynolds had maintained the habits of a man who might need to deploy on short notice. "Studies this way," Kate said, leading him down a hallway lined with photographs. She paused at one, showing her father in uniform beside a much younger Harrison, both men standing rigid at attention graduation day at Ranger School. Camp Rogers, 1981, Harrison identified without hesitation. Your father outperformed men 10 years younger, set the obstacle course record that stood for 6 years. Kate traced her father's face in the photograph. He never talked about his military service. Not really, just vague references to time in uniform. Compartmentalization, Harrison explained. The ability to separate parts of your life completely. Essential skill for what we did. He studied her with knowing eyes. You have it too. Special Forces teaches it well. They continued to the study, a Spartanly neat room dominated by a large oak desk. Bookshelves lined the walls, military history, law enforcement procedure manuals, and surprisingly, an extensive collection of classic literature. Lockbox, Harrison prompted. Kate moved to the desk, pulling open the bottom drawer to reveal a fireproof safe roughly the size of a small microwave. No digital keypad, just an old-fashioned combination dial. 3 attempts with the wrong combination triggers an internal thermite charge, she explained. Dad's design ensures complete destruction of contents if compromised. Harrison nodded appreciatively. Your father always thought 3 steps ahead. Kate ran her fingers over the combination dial. I tried his badge number, my birthday, Mom's birthday. Nothing worked. Harrison studied the safe thoughtfully. December 20th, 1989. Kate tried the date of the Panama operation. The dial refused to turn past the second number. No. Harrison's expression remained impassive, but his mind was clearly working through possibilities. The night we met, he said finally. At Camp Rogers, first night of Ranger training. 4 men in our bay couldn't handle the stress, quit before dawn. You have the date, Kate asked. July 17th, 1981. Harrison replied without hesitation. The day your father said separated the soldiers from the warriors. Kate dialed 71781. The mechanism clicked, but the safe remained locked. Harrison frowned. The southern barracks at Rogers was building 1981. Maybe try the building in Bay 1981-7. The safe remained stubbornly sealed. What else? Kate pressed. Something meaningful to both of you from Panama. Harrison thought deeply, accessing memories 3 decades old. The extraction point. Grid coordinates where we finally reached safety. Your father memorized them, said they were the coordinates of his rebirth. You remember them. To Durham, 7, 4 to 5, Harrison recited. 9 degrees, 20 minutes, 7.45 seconds. Kate entered the numbers slowly. The dial turned smoothly through all 6 digits, and with the final turn, the mechanism released with a solid thunk. Coordinates, she breathed. Of course. Inside the safe lay a weathered leather journal, a USB drive sealed in a waterproof container, and a small wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Kate removed the items carefully, placing them on the desk. The journal contained pages of meticulous notes in Thomas Reynolds's precise handwriting. Operational details. Names, dates spanning 3 decades of surveillance. He never stopped watching them, Kate realized, flipping through the pages. All these years he was tracking the conspirators, documenting their activities. Harrison opened the wooden box, revealing a vintage Ranger tab insignia. Turning it over, he found more microscopic coordinates etched into the metal backing. Your father's piece of the puzzle, he confirmed. 5 coordinates now, not 4. Kate connected the USB drive to her father's computer. It contained hundreds of scanned documents, audio files, and photographs. A digital insurance policy against data degradation. This is everything, she said, voice tight with emotion. Everything they killed him for. Harrison nodded grimly. and everything we need to finish what we started 34 years ago. As Kate gathered the evidence, Harrison moved to the window, scanning the perimeter with practiced vigilance. Something caught his attention, a flash of movement at the tree line quickly concealed. "We've got company," he said quietly, hand moving toward his concealed .38. Kate immediately shifted to combat awareness, her movements becoming measured and deliberate. "How many?" "At least 3 that I can see. Probably more." Harrison's tactical assessment was immediate and comprehensive. "They're establishing a perimeter. Professional work, not Crane's crew." "Professionals," Kate echoed, understanding the implication. "Mercenaries. Private military contractors," Harrison confirmed, "when you need deniable operations on U.S. soil." Kate secured the evidence in her jacket. "Options." Harrison appreciated her military brevity. "Limited. Houses surrounded. They'll have the driveway covered." "Basement exit," Kate suggested. "Dad installed an emergency tunnel after retirement. Comes out in the tool shed 50 yards back." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Your father always did have good tactical sense." They moved silently through the house, years of training evident in their coordinated movements. In the kitchen, Harrison paused, retrieving a canister of ground coffee from the cabinet. "What are you doing?" Kate whispered. Harrison unscrewed the bottom of the canister, revealing a hidden compartment containing a compact Sig Sauer P365. "Your father's backup. He showed me once, years ago." The basement access was concealed behind a bookshelf in the hallway, a classic design that would have seemed theatrical if not for the deadly serious circumstances. The tunnel beyond was narrow but well constructed, reinforced with timber supports, and equipped with emergency lighting that activated as they entered. "Dad built this himself," Kate explained as they navigated the passage. "Spent weekends on it for almost a year. I thought he was being paranoid." "Paranoia is just good preparation that hasn't been validated yet," Harrison replied, the old military maxim carrying new weight in their current situation. The tunnel emerged in a false wall at the back of a garden shed. Harrison checked the small viewing port before opening the concealed door, confirming the area was clear. "We're going to need transportation," Kate said, surveying the darkened property. Their vehicles were still at the clubhouse miles away. Harrison pointed to an old tarp in the corner of the shed. Beneath it sat a vintage Harley-Davidson Sportster, meticulously maintained despite its age. "Your father's bike," Harrison explained. "He kept it ready. Always." Kate stared at the motorcycle with newfound understanding. Another piece of her father's hidden life, preserved like a time capsule. "Can you ride?" Harrison asked. Kate nodded. "Dad taught me when I was 16. Said it was an essential skill." He was right. Harrison checked the fuel gauge. 3/4 tank, enough to get us back to the clubhouse. As they prepared to leave, a muffled explosion shook the ground. Through the shed window, they saw flames beginning to engulf the main house. "Covering their tracks," Harrison observed grimly. "Professional cleanup operation." Kate watched her childhood home burn, jaw tightening. "They'll pay for this." "Yes," Harrison agreed, his voice carrying the cold certainty of a soldier who had seen too much injustice go unpunished. "They will." They mounted the Sportster Harrison, taking the controls with Kate behind him, the evidence secure between them. The bike started with a subdued rumble. Thomas Reynolds had modified the exhaust for quieter operation. Another tactical consideration from a man who always planned for worst-case scenarios. Harrison guided the motorcycle along a back trail that wound through the property, avoiding the main driveway, where the mercenaries would be waiting. Kate kept watch behind them, Sig Sauer ready, though no pursuit materialized immediately. "They'll track us," she said over the engine's rumble. "They're too professional not to have contingencies." Harrison nodded. We've got maybe 30 minutes before they regroup. Need to make it count." As they emerged onto a backcountry road, Kate felt a strange convergence of past and present. She was riding her father's motorcycle with her father's oldest friend, carrying evidence her father had died protecting, heading toward a confrontation that had begun before she was born. The circle was closing, the past rushing toward them like the wind against their faces. Harrison accelerated the Sportster's engine, rising to a determined growl as they raced against time and enemies who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill. The evidence they carried was their only leverage, their only chance to expose a conspiracy decades in the making. Behind them, the glow of Kate's burning childhood home lit the night sky a beacon, announcing that the final confrontation had begun. See you Twist 5. 10 miles from the Freedom Riders clubhouse, Harrison suddenly cut the engine coasting the Sportster behind an abandoned gas station. His movements were decisive, practiced the instincts of a man who had survived by sensing danger before it materialized. "What is it?" Kate asked, combat awareness immediately heightened. "Roadblock ahead," Harrison replied, dismounting with fluid grace that belied his 72 years. "Not police, no lights, no official markers." Kate followed him to the edge of the building where they could observe the road beyond. 2 black SUVs were positioned across both lanes, men with tactical gear and weapons moving with military precision. "Private contractors," she assessed, recognizing the disciplined movements. "Same group from the house, different team, same employer," Harrison confirmed. "They've anticipated our route to the clubhouse." Kate studied the roadblock, counting 8 armed men with professional equipment plate carriers, tactical communications, semi-automatic weapons. Heavy response for 2 people. "Not for what we're carrying," Harrison countered, referring to the evidence secured in Kate's jacket. "That's enough to end careers and trigger federal investigations." They retreated to the Sportster, reassessing options. The direct route to the clubhouse was blocked, and backtracking risked encountering the team from the house. "Alternative routes," Kate asked, military pragmatism overriding frustration. Harrison considered briefly. "Old logging road 3 miles east. Connects to the highway beyond their perimeter. Rough terrain, but the Sportster can handle it." As he started the motorcycle, Kate's phone vibrated. A text message from Daniels, compromised. "Multiple hostiles. Evac in progress." "The clubhouse is under attack," she reported tersely. Harrison absorbed this without visible reaction, though his eyes hardened. "Coordinated operation. They're eliminating all witnesses and evidence simultaneously." "Where do we go?" Kate asked the question, carrying weight beyond immediate tactical concerns. Harrison was silent for a moment, calculating options with the precision of a chess grandmaster. "The evidence is what matters now. We need to secure it somewhere safe, then make contact with surviving Freedom Riders. Safe where these people have resources connections." "One place they can't reach," Harrison said with quiet certainty. "Federal custody. Direct handoff to FBI agents we can verify aren't compromised." Kate nodded, understanding the logic. "Nearest field office is in Billings 3 hours from here." "You're too far," Harrison countered. "We need someone closer, someone we can trust." His expression shifted as an idea formed. "Sheriff Dawson. Your father trained him, trusted him." "Dad always said Dawson was clean as mountain water," Kate agreed. "But the sheriff's department might be watched." "Not the department," Harrison clarified. "Dawson's hunting cabin, 20 miles northwest off Junction Creek Road. Tom and I helped him rebuild it 5 years ago." The decision made, they circled wide around the roadblock, taking secondary roads until they reached the logging trail Harrison had mentioned. The path was barely visible in the darkness, overgrown and rutted from years of disuse. Harrison navigated the challenging terrain with expertise, the Sportster responding to his subtle weight shifts and throttle adjustments. Despite the circumstances, Kate found herself impressed by the old ranger's riding skill, another reminder that age hadn't diminished his capabilities. The logging road eventually connected with a fire access route, which in turn led to a narrow county highway well beyond the mercenaries' perimeter. Harrison maintained a vigilant pace, balancing speed against the need for caution. "How much farther to Dawson's cabin?" Kate asked during a brief stretch of straight road. 7 miles, Harrison replied, voice carrying over the engine's rumble. "Remote location, defensible terrain. Good fallback position." They rode in tactical silence after that, both scanning for threats with the hyper-awareness that combat experience instills. The Montana night surrounded them, vast, dark, and momentarily sheltering. Sheriff Dawson's cabin appeared as a dark silhouette against the tree line, no lights visible. Harrison approached cautiously, cutting the engine 300 yards out and coasting the final distance in near silence. "Stay with the bike," he instructed Kate. "Cover the approach. I'll verify the cabin's secure." Kate positioned herself behind a fallen tree, Sig Sauer ready, as Harrison moved toward the cabin with the fluid stealth of a much younger man. His decades of ranger training remained evident in every calculated step. After a tense 5 minutes, Harrison reappeared at the cabin door, signaling all clear. Kate brought the Sportster forward, concealing it beneath the cabin's elevated porch. Inside the hunting lodge was spartanly furnished, but well-maintained, a wood stove, basic kitchen, 2 bunks, and a ham radio setup that seemed incongruous until Kate recognized its tactical value in areas with no cell service. "Dawson's prepared," she observed, noting the stockpile of canned food and emergency supplies. "Your father's influence," Harrison replied, securing the door. "He taught preparedness to everyone in his circle." Kate activated the ham radio, tuning to the emergency frequency Dawson had established for department use during communications outages. After identifying herself with the appropriate call sign, she waited. The response came within minutes, Dawson's voice tense but controlled. "Situation report." Kate provided a concise briefing on their circumstances, tactical training evident in her economy of words. Dawson listened without interruption, then responded with equal precision. "Remain in position. I'll arrive within 90 minutes. Secure transport following. Maintain radio silence unless emergency protocols warranted." After signing off, Kate turned to find Harrison studying her father's journal, his weathered face grave. "Your father documented everything," he said, showing her a page of meticulous notes. Names, dates, locations. He built a complete case against everyone involved in the Panama conspiracy. "Why didn't he come forward?" Kate asked the question that had been haunting her since learning the truth. "The final entry explains," Harrison replied, turning to the last written page. "Dated 3 days before his death." Kate took the journal, reading her father's precise handwriting, confirmed Hargrove's cabinet nomination process underway. Sources indicate announcement within month. Evidence compilation complete. Attempted contact today. Final opportunity for voluntary resolution. If no response by Friday, we'll activate fail-safe protocol and contact DOJ directly. God forgive me for waiting this long. He gave them one last chance, Kate realized, to come clean on their own terms. And they killed him for it, Harrison concluded grimly. These aren't men who negotiate. They eliminate problems. The weight of what they faced settled over the cabin. General William Hargrove commanded resources few could match: military connections, intelligence assets, private contractors willing to operate on American soil for the right price. "We're outgunned," Kate acknowledged, military realism overriding emotion. Outmanned, out-resourced. Harrison nodded, his expression resolute. Asymmetric warfare. Our specialty. Despite everything, Kate found herself smiling. The old ranger hadn't survived this long by accepting unfavorable odds at face value. "What's our play?" she asked, instinctively deferring to his experience. Harrison spread Thomas Reynolds's journal on the table, along with the coordinates from both his Silver Star and the Ranger tab from the lockbox. 5 locations, he said, indicating the encrypted coordinates. 5 evidence caches. Together, they provide irrefutable proof of 3 decades of criminal conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of military command. And we only need one to start the dominoes falling, Kate concluded. Harrison nodded approvingly. Nearest cache is here. He indicated a location in the Montana wilderness. Tom selected the sites carefully remote, defensible, but accessible with the right knowledge. We retrieve it, turn everything over to Dawson, and let the system work, Kate summarized. Harrison's expression turned grave. If the system still works. Men like Hargrove have spent decades embedding loyalists in every branch of government. We need to be prepared for resistance even after evidence is submitted. The sobering assessment hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about justice for Thomas Reynolds, it was about confronting corruption that had metastasized through decades of careful cultivation. U-twist 6, as Kate studied the map, a sudden realization struck her. The coordinates on your Silver Star, they don't match the system Dad used for the other locations. Harrison examined the microscopic etching more closely. Different format. Military grid versus latitude-longitude. It's not a location, Kate said, understanding dawning. It's a date and time. Dad used the same encoding system for sensitive information when he was sheriff. Harrison translated the numbers mentally, his expression changing as the pattern became clear. December 20th, 2024, 35 years to the day after Panama. A timed release, Kate breathed. Dad set something to activate on the anniversary. Insurance policy, Harrison agreed. If everything else failed, if all of us were eliminated, the truth would still come out. 5 months from now, Kate calculated, whatever Dad arranged, it happens then, regardless of what we do. Harrison's weathered face showed newfound respect. Your father was always 3 steps ahead. Even in death, he's controlling the battlefield. The revelation changed their tactical situation significantly. The conspirators weren't just chasing current evidence, they were racing against a deadline they might not even know existed. We have leverage, Kate realized. If Hargrove learns about the timed release, he might back off to avoid triggering it prematurely. Or accelerate his efforts to find and neutralize it, Harrison countered realistically. Men like Hargrove don't surrender power willingly. Their strategic discussion was interrupted by the distinctive sound of tires on gravel, a vehicle approaching the cabin. Harrison moved immediately to a defensive position covering the door, while Kate secured the evidence and took position at the window. Headlights appeared through the trees, then died as the vehicle stopped 100 yards from the cabin. A moment later, the sound of a car door opening and closing, followed by a single set of footsteps. Sheriff Dawson, Kate identified, recognizing his distinctive gait. Harrison maintained his position until visual confirmation was possible through the window. Only then did he lower his weapon, though his vigilance remained undiminished. Dawson entered with the controlled urgency of a man accustomed to crisis management. His uniform was replaced by civilian clothing, his badge and service weapon conspicuously absent. "Departments compromised," he announced without preamble. "2 federal agents showed up 20 minutes after your radio contact. Flashed credentials demanded access to all communications records." Hargrove's people, Harrison assessed. Dawson nodded grimly. Moving fast. Freedom Riders Clubhouse was hit hard professional team military-grade tactics. At least 3 riders confirmed down. Kate felt the news like a physical blow. Casualties unknown. Dawson replied, the admission clearly paining him. Survivors scattered per evacuation protocol. Daniels is off-grid location unknown. The tactical situation had deteriorated faster than anticipated. Within hours of James Harrison's identity being confirmed at Veterans Corner, a decades-old conspiracy had mobilized resources that would impress many nation-states. "They're scorching the earth," Harrison observed quietly. "Eliminating everyone connected to Panama, securing all evidence before Hargrove's nomination goes public." "What's our move?" Dawson asked, deferring to Harrison's experience despite outranking him in civilian authority. See you, Twist 7. Harrison was silent for a long moment, weighing options with the careful deliberation of a man who had seen plans succeed and fail in equal measure. When he finally spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. "No more running," he said, the simple declaration carrying the weight of 3 decades of exile. "I've spent 34 years hiding from this fight. That ends tonight." Kate and Dawson exchanged glances, recognizing the resolve of a soldier who had made his final tactical decision. "What exactly are you proposing?" Dawson asked carefully. Harrison's eyes met Kate's, something like apology visible in their depths, before his expression hardened again. "Tom Reynolds died protecting a secret that should have been exposed decades ago," he said. "I won't let anyone else make that sacrifice. Not the Freedom Riders. Not you." His gaze remained locked with Kate's. "And not his daughter." Understanding dawned on Kate with cold certainty. "You're going to surrender yourself." Harrison nodded once. "Along with my piece of the evidence, draw their focus away from you and the other survivors." "That's suicide," Dawson objected bluntly. "It's tactical redistribution," Harrison countered. "I'm the primary target, the one who disobeyed orders in Panama, the one who carried 1/8 of the evidence for 34 years. My surrender creates an opportunity for the rest of you to maneuver." Kate recognized the strategy from her own military training, the calculated sacrifice of a high-value piece to enable a winning endgame. It was tactically sound and personally devastating. "No," she said flatly. "We find another way." Harrison's expression softened momentarily. "Kate, your father made his choice to protect the truth. Now I'm making mine." "And what about my choice?" she demanded, Thomas Reynolds's daughter showing through in her unwavering intensity. "Dad didn't raise me to let others fight my battles." "This isn't your battle," Harrison began. "The hell it isn't," Kate cut him off. "They killed my father, burned my home, attacked people who were like family to him." Her voice remained steady despite the emotion behind her words. "I'm a Reynolds. We finish what we start." The declaration hung in the air between them, the stubbornness of 2 soldiers accustomed to making life-or-death decisions, neither willing to back down. Dawson broke the impasse with the pragmatism of a career lawman. "We've got maybe 2 hours before they track us here. Whatever we're doing, we need to decide now." Harrison studied Kate, seeing Thomas Reynolds's determination mirrored in his daughter's unwavering stance. Finally, he nodded once, a soldier acknowledging a battle he wouldn't win. "Counter-proposal," he offered. "We split the evidence. Different vectors, different destinations. Increases the probability of at least one package reaching safe hands." Kate considered this tactical analysis, overriding emotion. 3 packages, 3 couriers, 3 separate federal offices. Simultaneous delivery ensures at least one gets through. "I can reach the U.S. Attorney's Office in Helena," Dawson contributed. Got a contact there from a joint task force operation last year. Man I'd trust with my life. FBI field office in Billings for me, Kate decided. I've got the training to evade pursuit and the tactical skills to complete delivery. Harrison nodded, the plan taking shape. I'll take the highest risk route direct to Washington. I've still got contacts at the Pentagon who aren't under Hargrove's thumb. Men who remember the real meaning of the oath we took. They spent the next 30 minutes preparing, dividing the evidence into 3 secure packages, each containing enough documentation to trigger an investigation that would uncover the rest. Dawson provided additional weapons and communication equipment from his emergency cache. As they prepared to depart, Harrison pulled Kate aside, his weathered hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. "He always said you were the best of both of us, his strategic mind and my stubborn backbone." Kate blinked against unexpected emotion. "You never told me you were that close to him." "Some friendships don't need advertisement," Harrison replied. Tom knew. That was enough. The moment was interrupted by Dawson's urgent gesture from the window. "Vehicle approaching. No lights. Tactical approach." They moved instantly to defensive positions, the brief personal exchange forgotten as combat awareness took precedence. "Multiple heat signatures," Dawson reported using a thermal scope from his equipment cache. "Professional spacing. Tactical formation. Exfil route," Kate asked military shorthand for evacuation options. "Rear trail leads to secondary road," Dawson replied. "Sportsters are best bet for breaking contact. Too narrow for pursuit vehicles." Harrison made the decision with characteristic efficiency. "Sheriff takes north route to Helena. Kate and I go south, then separate at Junction 41. Rendezvous only after successful delivery." The plan acknowledged tactical reality. Splitting their pursuers' resources would increase survival chances for at least one evidence package. As the mercenaries closed in on the cabin, the 3 defenders slipped out the rear entrance, moving with the disciplined silence of professionals. The Sportster was rolled, not started, until they had put sufficient distance between themselves and the approaching threat. When the motorcycle's engine finally rumbled to life, Harrison opened the throttle without hesitation, accelerating hard down the narrow forest trail. Behind them, shouts and vehicle engines signaled that their escape had been detected. Kate held tight as Harrison navigated the challenging terrain with remarkable skill, the Sportster responding to his expert handling like an extension of his body. Despite their age difference in this moment, they were simply soldiers executing a mission, their shared military experience bridging generations. The trail eventually connected with a fire access road, allowing greater speed, but also increasing their visibility. Harrison pushed the motorcycle to its limits, knowing their advantage lay in the Sportster's maneuverability rather than outright speed. Headlights appeared in the distance behind them, pursuit vehicles gaining ground on the wider road. Harrison's tactical assessment was immediate. "Need to split their resources," he said over the engine's roar. "Junction ahead. You take the bike, head east toward Billings. I'll go west on foot, draw them off." Kate's objection was immediate. "Negative. We stick to the plan." "Plans adapt to battlefield conditions," Harrison countered, the old ranger's experience evident in his tone. "This is tactical necessity, not self-sacrifice." Before Kate could argue further, Harrison made the decision for both of them, swinging the Sportster onto a logging trail and killing the engine and lights. They dismounted in darkness, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. 2 minutes, Harrison said with quiet authority. "Then you restart and take the East Fork at full throttle. I'll create a diversion to the west, make them split forces." Kate recognized the tactical soundness of the plan despite her reluctance. Rendezvous, old fire tower at Copper Ridge. If neither arrives by dawn, proceed independently to delivery points. The arrangement made, they waited in tense silence as the pursuit vehicles approached the junction. Harrison checked his weapons one final time, the practiced movements visible even in the darkness. "Kate," he said quietly, "if I don't make the rendezvous, tell the Freedom Riders it was worth it. All of it." Before she could respond, Harrison melted into the forest with the silent efficiency that had made him a legendary ranger. Moments later, a sudden explosion erupted from the western road, a diversion created from materials in the saddlebags. The pursuing vehicles immediately diverted toward the apparent threat. Kate waited the prescribed 2 minutes, then restarted the Sportster, accelerating east without lights. Harrison's diversion had worked. Only one vehicle broke off to follow her, the others continuing west after what they perceived as the primary target. As she raced through the Montana night evidence secured against her body, Kate thought of the old ranger who had carried his burden alone for 34 years, who had watched over her without her knowledge, who had in the end taught her the true meaning of her father's most frequent admonition: "Duty doesn't expire with your enlistment, it just changes form." Behind her, gunfire erupted in the distance, Harrison engaging his pursuers, buying her time with the same determination that had saved 8 men in a Panamanian jungle 34 years earlier. Kate Reynolds, daughter of Thomas Reynolds, student of James Harrison, tightened her grip on the handlebars and pushed the Sportster harder into the darkness. The mission had to succeed. Too many had sacrificed too much for failure to be an option. The evidence would reach its destination. Justice would finally be served. That was the only acceptable outcome for the daughter of a man who had died protecting the truth and the protege of a man who had spent 3 decades in exile for the same cause. The reckoning was coming. After 34 years of shadows, the thunder of justice was finally rolling across the Montana sky. The old fire tower at Copper Ridge stood sentinel over the Montana wilderness, a weathered monument to a bygone era when men with binoculars, not satellites, watched for the first wisps of smoke. Its steel frame had withstood decades of mountain winters, rust claiming the exterior, while the core remained stubbornly intact, much like the man who now approached its base. James Harrison moved through the pre-dawn forest with the disciplined silence of a ranger who had never forgotten his training. Blood darkened his left sleeve where a bullet had grazed him during the night's engagement, but his movements betrayed no hint of pain or fatigue. At 72, he remained a soldier to his core mission-focused, tactically sound, relentless in execution. The rendezvous time wasn't for another hour, but Harrison had always preferred to secure a position early. He circled the tower's perimeter twice, checking for signs of surveillance or ambush, before climbing the metal stairs. Each step was taken with tactical awareness testing, weight distribution, minimizing sound, maintaining visual coverage of approach angles. The observation platform offered a 360-degree view of the surrounding terrain. Harrison settled into a sheltered corner rifle across his knees and began the methodical process of checking his wounds. The bullet graze required nothing more than the field dressing he'd already applied, but his right shoulder had reopened during his escape, an old Panama injury that had never healed properly. As he redressed the wound, Harrison's mind turned to Kate Reynolds. She had evaded pursuit successfully. He'd heard the mercenary's frustrated radio chatter before breaking contact, but her current status remained unknown. The evidence she carried represented their best chance at exposing Hargrove's conspiracy and obtaining justice for Thomas Reynolds. The crackle of broken underbrush below brought Harrison to immediate alert. He shifted to a firing position, M14 rifle braced against his shoulder scope, trained on the forest edge. A familiar silhouette emerged from the trees, Michael "Ghost" Daniels, moving with the fluid grace that had earned him his call sign decades earlier. Harrison lowered his weapon, allowing himself a small measure of relief. Daniels' survival meant the Freedom Riders hadn't been completely neutralized. More movement at the tree line, additional riders emerging in tactical formation, maintaining proper spacing and vigilant posture. Harrison counted 12 men, all combat veterans judging by their movement patterns, all armed with the quiet confidence of those who had faced worse odds and survived. He descended the tower stairs to meet them, noting the tactical gear they now wore beneath their leather cuts, the ceremonial clothing of the motorcycle club, replaced by the practical equipment of experienced combatants. "Thought you might be dead," Daniels greeted him, the understated delivery masking genuine concern. "Not from lack of trying on their part," Harrison replied, equally restrained. "Clubhouse. Hit hard. 3 wounded, no KIA. Everyone scattered per protocol." Harrison nodded, processing the information with professional detachment. "Kate, no contact yet," Daniels answered. "But she's Tom Reynolds' daughter. I'd bet on her against most Special Forces teams." The assessment wasn't mere comfort. It was the professional evaluation of a Delta Force veteran who had seen Kate's tactical skills firsthand. "We've secured a fallback position." Daniels continued, leading Harrison toward the tree line. "Old hunting cabin 5 miles north. Belongs to Peterson's brother-in-law. Off-grid, defensible terrain, stocked for emergency use." The cabin came into view after an hour's tactical movement through dense forest, a substantial log structure nestled against a rocky hillside. Unlike the quaint vacation properties that dotted Montana's tourist areas, this building had been constructed with security in mind. Limited approach vectors, reinforced walls, strategic placement of windows for defensive firing positions. Inside, Harrison found the remaining Freedom Riders had established a fully operational command center. Radio equipment lined one wall, monitors displaying security camera feeds from the perimeter. Maps covered a central table marked with tactical notations and contingency routes. "Vietnam-era Field HQ setup," Harrison observed, recognizing the time-tested configuration. "Effective." "Some lessons don't need updating," agreed a gray-haired rider checking a radio transceiver. "Technology changes. Principles don't." Harrison surveyed the assembled veterans. Despite their age, most in their 60s or 70s, they moved with the practiced efficiency of men who had never fully left the battlefield behind. Muscle memory and tactical awareness remained intact decades after their formal service had ended. "Situation update," Daniels requested, gathering the senior riders around the central table. A former military intelligence officer, designated as their tactical coordinator, began the briefing. 3 separate mercenary teams operating in the region, approximately 30 operators, total professional-grade equipment, military tactics. They've established vehicle checkpoints on all major roads and have air support on standby at Helena Regional. He indicated known positions on the map, each marked with timestamps and force estimates. "Local law enforcement has been compromised," he continued. "Sheriff Dawson is confirmed friendly, but his department has been effectively sidelined by federal agents claiming jurisdiction over a domestic terrorism investigation." "Hargrove's people," Daniels translated grimly. "Affirmative. Using national security protocols to establish operational control of the area." Harrison studied the tactical situation with the measured assessment of a career soldier. The opposing force had resources, organization, and official cover for their operations. Conventional resistance would be futile. "What about Kate?" he asked. "No confirmed contact," the intelligence officer replied. "Last known heading was eastbound toward Billings, consistent with the extraction plan. Roadblocks were established approximately 30 minutes after your separation, but satellite imagery shows her bike bypassed main routes, likely using forestry service roads." Harrison nodded, unsurprised. Kate had inherited her father's tactical instincts, and enhanced them with formal military training. She would improvise, and complete the mission. And Sheriff Dawson, he inquired, concerned about their third courier. Successfully evaded initial pursuit. Current status unknown, but his vehicle was spotted heading north on Route 287 3 hours ago. Appears to be maintaining his assigned vector toward Helena. At least 2 of their evidence packages were still in play then. Harrison allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism before turning to the immediate tactical situation. What's our position here? Sustainability. Supplies for 2 weeks, Daniels answered. Defensive perimeter established with early warning systems. Communications secure but limited short-range encrypted radio only. No cellular or internet to prevent electronic tracking. Reinforcements. On standby. Freedom Riders chapters in 6 states have mobilized. Veterans networks activated. If we give the signal, we'll have 200 riders within 12 hours. Harrison absorbed this information, weighing options against liabilities. Additional personnel would provide tactical advantages, but also increase their visibility and resource requirements. Hold them in reserve, he decided, until we confirm Kate and Dawson have delivered their packages. Our priority is securing the evidence, not engaging superior forces. Daniels nodded agreement. Mission focus, not force-on-force confrontation. A radio operator interrupted, holding out a handset. Incoming transmission. Authentication code matches Reynolds Catherine. Harrison took the radio relief visible despite his disciplined demeanor. Secure channel. Affirmative. Frequency hopping encryption active. Iron Horse receiving. Harrison transmitted using his old call sign. Kate's voice came through with the characteristic distortion of encrypted radio, but the measured calm in her tone was unmistakable. Package in motion. ETA Billings 0900. Surveillance heavy. Implementing alternate delivery protocol. Status? Harrison inquired, professional brevity masking personal concern. Operational. Minor damage sustained. Vehicle compromised, proceeding on secondary transport. Harrison decoded the standardized military communication. Kate had been injured, but remained combat effective. She'd lost the motorcycle, but secured alternative transportation. Most importantly, the evidence was still secure and moving toward its destination. Confirm receipt and maintain radio silence until delivery complete, Harrison instructed. Ghost sends regards. Acknowledged. Reynolds out. As the transmission ended, Harrison turned to find Daniels studying a newly arrived message on another radio. Sheriff Dawson's package is secure, Daniels reported. He's made contact with his U.S. attorney connection in Helena. Evidence is being processed now. The tactical situation had suddenly shifted in their favor. One evidence package had reached its destination, another was hours from delivery. Even if Kate encountered trouble, Dawson's successful delivery ensured the conspiracy would be exposed. Harrison allowed himself a moment of vindication. After 34 years, the truth about Panama would finally come to light. Thomas Reynolds's death would be avenged. The men who had profited from betrayal would face justice. The moment was shattered by the urgent voice of their perimeter lookout. Movement on the access road. 3 vehicles, tactical approach pattern. The cabin transformed instantly from command center to defensive position. Riders moved to predetermined stations, weapons, ready communication, shifting to hand signals to maintain noise discipline. Harrison took position at a reinforced window covering the main approach M14, braced against the frame. Through his scope, he observed 3 black SUVs advancing slowly along the access road, maintaining tactical spacing. Victor Crane's people, he asked Daniels, who had taken up position at an adjacent window. Negative, Daniels replied, studying the vehicles through binoculars. Different operational signature. These are Hargrove's direct assets, not the local muscle. The distinction was significant. Crane and his black serpents were dangerous, but undisciplined. The force now approaching represented the elite core of Hargrove's private military resources, former Special Forces operators, who had traded their oath for profit. 12 visible, probably more concealed, Daniels assessed. Full tactical gear, professional weapons. These aren't amateurs. Harrison considered their options with the rapid assessment of combat experience. The cabin was defensible but not impregnable. Against a determined assault by superior forces, they could hold out for hours, perhaps a day, but not indefinitely. "We need time," he said finally. "Not victory, just enough delay for Kate's evidence to reach the FBI." Daniels nodded, understanding the tactical objective. Holding action. Delay and disrupt rather than defeat. Exactly. Harrison surveyed the assembled riders. "These men have come for me specifically. I can draw them away, create separation between their forces." "Not happening," Daniels cut him off. "No one rides alone. That's the first rule." The other Freedom Riders murmured agreement, their expressions resolute. These were men who had sworn never again to abandon a brother in combat, a promise forged in the jungles of Vietnam, the deserts of Iraq, the mountains of Afghanistan. "Then we make our stand here," Harrison acknowledged, recognizing the unbreakable bond of warriors who had chosen their battlefield. Delay, disrupt, survive. The approaching vehicles halted 300 yards from the cabin, beyond effective small arms range, but close enough for visual assessment. A tactical team deployed in textbook formation, establishing a perimeter while maintaining vehicles as cover. "They're being cautious," Daniels observed. "Good. Buys us time." Harrison studied their deployment through his scope, noting their professionalism with grudging respect. Former military, probably ex-Special Forces based on their movement patterns. "Brothers once," a Vietnam veteran muttered from his position. "Now hunting brothers for a paycheck." A figure emerged from the center vehicle, tall, lean, moving with the practiced efficiency of a career operator. Unlike the tactical team, he wore no body armor or helmet, just a simple black windbreaker over tactical pants. Even at this distance, his military bearing was unmistakable. Colonel Reed Blackwood. Daniels identified him, surprise evident in his voice. Hargrove's chief of security, former Delta Force commander. Harrison's jaw tightened. "I know him. He was a captain in '94 when I testified against his father for weapons trafficking. Career should have ended there, but Hargrove protected him, promoted him. Now he's returned the favor by becoming Hargrove's personal enforcer," Daniels concluded grimly. Blackwood raised a handheld radio, his voice coming through their scanner moments later. "Attention occupants. This is Colonel Reed Blackwood. I'm authorized to resolve this situation with minimal complications. Sergeant Harrison. I know you're in there. Let's discuss terms." Harrison exchanged glances with Daniels, both men recognizing the tactical play, an attempt to open negotiation while assault teams likely maneuvered into flanking positions. "No response," Harrison decided. "Let him talk. Each minute is 1 minute closer to Kate reaching Billings." Blackwood waited 30 seconds before continuing. "Sergeant Harrison, I understand your position. You believe you're protecting something important. But the situation has changed. Sheriff Dawson was intercepted before reaching Helena. The evidence he carried has been contained." Harrison and Daniels shared a look of concern. If true, their position had weakened significantly. "We've also identified Catherine Reynolds's destination," Blackwood continued. "Assets are in position to intercept her before she reaches the FBI field office. This isn't a negotiation, Sergeant. It's a courtesy notification. Your options have been systematically eliminated." The calculated confidence in Blackwood's voice carried the ring of truth, or at least of a man who believed his own intelligence reports. Could be a bluff, Daniels suggested, though without conviction. Maybe, Harrison acknowledged. But Blackwood was never one for empty threats. A new voice came over their secure radio, breaking through the tense silence. Freedom actual to home base. Authentication Sierra Tango 739. The radio operator checked the authentication against their codebook, then nodded confirmation. It's Sheriff Dawson. Harrison took the handset. Status report. Package delivered, came Dawson's terse reply. U.S. Attorney secured evidence 20 minutes ago. Federal protective custody established. Be advised disinformation being broadcast on unsecured channels claiming my capture. Relief swept through the cabin. Blackwood's claim was indeed false, a psychological tactic to undermine their resolve. Acknowledged, Harrison responded. Maintain position within federal protection. Do not attempt to reach our location. Understood. Be advised, major response mobilizing. Federal agencies activating independently of military channels. Appears package contents have triggered immediate action protocols. The implications were significant. Whatever Thomas Reynolds had documented was serious enough to bypass normal investigative procedures. The evidence was already working its way through the system beyond Hargrove's ability to contain it. One down, one to go, Daniels observed as the transmission ended. Kate just needs to reach Billings. Harrison returned his attention to Blackwood, who remained waiting with the practiced patience of a professional soldier. The psychological warfare continued, each side calculating odds, assessing weaknesses, awaiting the other's error. Let's change the equation, Harrison decided, moving away from the window. Daniels maintained defensive positions. I'm going to have a conversation with the colonel. That's exactly what he wants, Daniels objected. Yes, Harrison agreed, which makes it unexpected when it happens on our terms, not his. Before Daniels could argue further, Harrison was moving toward the cabin's rear exit, away from Blackwood's line of sight. Years of combat experience had taught him that initiative once surrendered was difficult to reclaim. By engaging Blackwood directly, he would disrupt the colonel's careful tactical calculations. Harrison circled through the dense forest using terrain features for concealment until he had positioned himself behind Blackwood's forces. The mercenaries had indeed been establishing a surrounding perimeter, just as he'd suspected. Their focus remained on the cabin, allowing him to approach their command position undetected. Colonel Blackwood stood beside his vehicle, studying a tactical display on a ruggedized tablet. Two security personnel flanked him, attentive, but not expecting threat from their supposedly secure rear area. "Hello, Reed," Harrison called, stepping into view with his rifle held non-threateningly across his chest. "Been a long time." The security personnel spun, weapons rising, but Blackwood raised a hand to halt them. His expression registered surprise before settling into professional composure. "Sergeant Harrison," he acknowledged. "Bold move approaching alone." "Thought we should talk?" Harrison replied evenly. "Without the theatrics." Blackwood studied him with the calculating assessment of a tactician. "You've aged well for a man who's spent 3 decades looking over his shoulder." "Clean living and a clear conscience," Harrison responded. "Something your employer wouldn't understand." A thin smile crossed Blackwood's face. "Still the same self-righteous ranger. Some things never change." He gestured toward the surrounding forest. "Others do. You're outmanned, outgunned, and out of options. Whatever evidence you think you have is being contained as we speak." "Is that what Hargrove told you?" Harrison asked. "That you could contain the truth after all these years? That you could silence everyone who knows what happened in Panama?" Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes, a moment of uncertainty quickly masked. Panama is ancient history. No one cares about a botched black operation from 3 decades ago. They'll care about American soldiers who died because their commanders were profiting from arming the enemy, Harrison countered. They'll care about 34 years of covered-up crimes. They'll care about Thomas Reynolds being murdered to protect General Hargrove's cabinet nomination. Harrison saw the impact of his words. Blackwood hadn't been fully briefed on the scope of what they possessed. Like most compartmentalized operations, the colonel knew only what Hargrove had deemed necessary for his mission. "You don't know what you're involved in, do you?" Harrison pressed the advantage. "Hargrove's using you just like he used your father. Another Blackwood to take the fall if things go sideways." The colonel's expression hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Your father went to Leavenworth for weapons trafficking. Hargrove walked away clean, despite being the operations architect. Now you're doing his dirty work, while he prepares to become Secretary of Defense. History repeating itself." Blackwood's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "What exactly do you want, Harrison?" "For you to walk away," Harrison answered simply. "Sheriff Dawson has already delivered his evidence package to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Helena. Federal protocols have been activated. It's over, Reed. All you're doing now is adding to the charges that will eventually be filed." Hugh Twist 8. For a moment, indecision crossed Blackwood's features. Then his radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Colonel, we've intercepted communication indicating Victor Crane has secured the evidence from Catherine Reynolds. He's demanding additional payment for immediate delivery to an offshore buyer." Blackwood's expression shifted calculation, replacing uncertainty. "Understood. Maintain position." He returned his attention to Harrison, confidence restored. "It seems Mr. Crane has resolved our problem independently. Always useful to have deniable assets." Harrison's mind raced through implications. Victor Crane had somehow intercepted Kate. But rather than delivering the evidence to Hargrove's people as expected, he was attempting to leverage it for personal profit. "Victor doesn't understand what he's holding," Harrison said, genuine concern breaking through his professional demeanor. "That evidence doesn't just implicate Hargrove. It details connections to foreign intelligence services, unauthorized weapons transfers operations that violated international law." "Which is precisely why it can never see daylight," Blackwood replied coldly. "National security supersedes your personal vendetta, Sergeant." "This isn't about vengeance," Harrison countered. "It's about justice for the men who died because of Hargrove's greed. It's about honoring the oath we all took to defend the Constitution, not use it as cover for criminal enterprise." For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered in Blackwood's eyes, one soldier acknowledging another's commitment to principles higher than self-interest. Then his professional mask returned. "Admirable, but irrelevant," he stated flatly. "Crane will deliver the evidence, Hargrove's nomination will proceed, and this entire episode will be forgotten." He nodded toward the cabin. "Your Freedom Riders can disband and return home without consequence, provided they maintain silence." "And me?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. "You've been a liability for 34 years, Sergeant." "That won't change." The cold calculation in Blackwood's voice confirmed what Harrison had suspected: he would not leave this encounter alive if he surrendered. The same fate likely awaited Kate Reynolds, once Victor Crane had extracted whatever payment he could negotiate. "I appreciate your honesty," Harrison said quietly, "but I think I'll take my chances with the Freedom Riders." Before Blackwood could respond, the distant sound of motorcycle engines broke the forest silence, not the coordinated rumble of a formation approach, but the aggressive acceleration of combat driving. Both men turned toward the sound as a motorcycle burst from the forest edge, a battered Harley Sportster, pushing its limits across the uneven terrain. Kate Reynolds hunched low over the handlebars, driving with the focused intensity of a soldier on final approach. Behind her, 3 motorcycles gave chase, black serpents riding hard weapons visible in their hands. "Seems your intelligence was incomplete," Harrison observed mildly. Again. Blackwood barked orders into his radio, his tactical team immediately repositioning to intercept the approaching riders. Harrison used the momentary distraction to fade back into the forest, tactically withdrawing to a covered position where he could assess the rapidly evolving situation. Kate's maneuvers demonstrated her military training using terrain features for partial cover, varying her speed and direction to complicate targeting. The pursuing black serpents maintained poor tactical discipline, bunching together instead of establishing a proper pursuit formation. As Kate neared the cabin perimeter, the Freedom Riders opened coordinated suppressive fire, not at the mercenaries but at the ground before the pursuing bikers. The precision shooting kicked up dirt geysers that forced the black serpents to veer off, disrupting their pursuit without directly engaging Blackwood's better-equipped forces. Kate slid the Sportster into a controlled stop at the cabin's entrance, dismounting in a fluid motion that spoke of countless training hours. Only as she moved toward the door did Harrison notice the dark stain spreading across her left side, an injury sustained during her escape. Blackwood's forces held position, unwilling to advance directly against the Freedom Riders' established defensive positions. The Black Serpents regrouped at the forest edge, equally hesitant to continue their pursuit into potential crossfire. A tactical stalemate had developed, the Freedom Riders secure in their defensive position, Blackwood's mercenaries controlling the approaches, the Black Serpents hovering at the periphery like opportunistic scavengers. Harrison used the confusion to circle back toward the cabin, maintaining cover and moving with the disciplined silence that had kept him alive through decades of conflict. He reached the rear entrance undetected, slipping inside to find Kate receiving medical attention from a former combat medic. "Knife wound, right intercostal space," the medic reported professionally. "No major organ involvement. Field dressing, holding for now, but she needs proper medical care within 12 hours. Kate's face was pale from blood loss, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "Package is secure," she reported to Harrison. "Victor's crew intercepted me 10 miles from Billings. I evaded initial pursuit, but took a hit during the extraction." "Extraction?" Harrison questioned. A tight smile crossed Kate's features despite the pain. "Let's just say Victor's going to need a new second-in-command, and a new bike." Harrison couldn't help but admire her composure. Thomas Reynolds's daughter had proven herself every bit as formidable as her father. "Dawson's package reached the U.S. attorney," he informed her. "Federal protocols activated. Even if they secure your evidence, the process has begun." "Then we've won," Kate concluded. "Or at least we haven't lost." "Not yet," Harrison qualified, moving toward the tactical map. "But Blackwood has us contained and Victor's crew is still in play. Our position remains precarious." Daniels joined them, his expression grim. "Perimeter report indicates they're establishing a complete encirclement. Professional containment protocol. They're settling in for a siege." The tactical reality was stark. With Kate injured and their forces limited, a prolonged standoff favored Blackwood's better-resourced team. Even with one evidence package secured, the conspiracy could be contained if Hargrove's people eliminated all witnesses and recovered the remaining evidence. "We need to complete the mission," Harrison decided. "Get Kate's package to federal custody to reinforce Dawson's evidence." "Not happening through that perimeter," Daniels assessed realistically. "They've got every approach covered." Kate struggled to a sitting position despite the medic's objections. "There's another option," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. One my father prepared for exactly this scenario. She withdrew a satellite phone from her jacket, not standard civilian technology, but a military-grade secure communication device. Direct line to FBI counterintelligence, she explained. Dad established the connection years ago as his final fail-safe. Said if everything else failed, this would reach people even Hargrove couldn't touch. Harrison and Daniels exchanged glances, both recognizing the significance. Thomas Reynolds had indeed planned for every contingency, including the possibility that physical evidence might never reach its destination. Do it, Harrison authorized, acknowledging that the tactical situation demanded their final option. Kate activated the phone, entered a complex authentication sequence, and established connection. Her voice remained remarkably steady as she identified herself and provided the prearranged code phrases Thomas Reynolds had established years earlier. Evidence in hand, she concluded, requesting immediate extraction and protective custody for multiple witnesses. The response was immediate and unambiguous. Authentication confirmed. Assets mobilizing. Maintain position. Estimated arrival 30 minutes. As Kate ended the transmission, Harrison felt a weight lifting that he had carried for 34 years. The machinery of justice, once set in motion, could no longer be contained by even Hargrove's considerable influence. They're coming, he told the assembled Freedom Riders. Federal response team operating outside Hargrove's chain of command. We just need to hold this position for 30 minutes. The veterans nodded with grim determination. 30 minutes under siege was a tactical challenge they had trained for throughout their military careers. This was familiar ground, defending a position against superior forces while awaiting extraction. Harrison moved methodically through the cabin, checking positions, adjusting fields of fire, ensuring maximum defensive efficiency with their limited personnel. Despite their age, these men fell naturally into the rhythms of combat operations, muscle memory, and training, overriding the decades since their active service. Outside Blackwood's forces maintained their containment perimeter while avoiding direct engagement, a professional waiting game. The Black Serpents remained at the forest edge, Victor Crane apparently unwilling to confront either the Freedom Riders or Blackwood's mercenaries directly. 20 minutes into their holding action, the tactical situation shifted suddenly. A new sound rose above the forest, the distinctive percussion of helicopter rotors approaching at high speed. Air assets incoming, the radio operator reported. Multiple helicopters, military configuration. Blackwood's forces reacted immediately, command vehicles repositioning as tactical teams adjusted to the new threat vector. The Black Serpents scattered into the forest, unwilling to face whatever was approaching. The first helicopter appeared over the ridge, not the civilian models used by local law enforcement, but a military UH-60 Blackhawk in FBI hostage rescue team livery. It was followed by two more, establishing a tactical formation above the cabin clearing. From the lead helicopter, armed operators fast-roped to the ground, establishing a security perimeter with practiced efficiency. These weren't regular agents, but the FBI's elite tactical response team operators selected from Special Forces backgrounds and equipped for high-risk intervention. Blackwood's mercenaries found themselves suddenly outmanned and outgunned by federal forces operating with clear legal authority. Professional pragmatism prevailed over loyalty to Hargrove. The mercenaries withdrew rather than engage in a firefight with federal agents that they couldn't possibly win. Inside the cabin, Harrison watched the operation unfold with the appreciation of a career soldier. Textbook HRT insertion, he observed. Your father's connections reached to the highest levels. Kate nodded, pride evident despite her weakened condition. Dad always said, if you're going to build a failsafe, make it something even God can't ignore. The FBI tactical team secured the perimeter before their commander approached the cabin. He was a middle-aged man with the compact build and watchful eyes of a career operator. Special Agent Marcus Whelan, FBI Counterintelligence. He introduced himself. Thomas Reynolds and I worked together for 15 years building the case against Hargrove. We've been waiting for this call. Harrison absorbed this revelation with newfound respect for Thomas Reynolds' strategic foresight. The sheriff hadn't just documented the conspiracy, he had cultivated the relationships necessary to ensure justice would eventually prevail. Catherine Reynolds, Whelan continued, turning to Kate. Your father spoke highly of you, said you'd carry the torch if anything happened to him. He never told me, Kate replied, emotion breaking through her professional composure. Compartmentalization, Whelan explained. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. He surveyed the assembled Freedom Riders. Gentlemen, you've done your country a service today that few will ever know about. Now I need to get you to secure locations before Hargrove realizes his containment has failed. See you Twist 9. The extraction proceeded with military precision. Kate's evidence package was secured, her wound properly treated by the HRT medic. The Freedom Riders were organized for transport to federal protective custody, their decades-long vigil finally ending. As Harrison prepared to board the helicopter, a commotion at the forest edge drew his attention. Victor Crane emerged from the trees alone and unarmed, his hands raised in clear surrender. I want to make a deal, he called out, approaching cautiously as FBI agents moved to intercept him. I have information about Hargrove's operation, names, dates, offshore accounts. Everything my father documented before he died in prison. Harrison and Daniels exchanged knowing glances. Victor Crane had finally recognized which way the wind was blowing and was attempting to save himself. Your call, Whelan said to Harrison. This case started with you 34 years ago. Seems fitting you should decide how we handle Crane. Harrison considered the man who had threatened him, who had participated in Hargrove's conspiracy, who had pursued Kate with deadly intent. Then he thought of Victor's father, another man who had made the wrong choices and paid with his life in a federal prison. Take his information, Harrison decided finally. Justice isn't about vengeance, it's about truth. If he has pieces of the puzzle we're missing, we should hear them. Whelan nodded respect for the decision. Always the ranger making the hard call. He turned to his team. Process him according to protocol. Full protective custody until debriefing complete. As the helicopters lifted off, Harrison looked back at the cabin that had served as their final defensive position. The Freedom Riders had made their stand there, old soldiers, honoring an oath that transcended time and politics. Some promises, he reflected, never expired. Beside him, Kate Reynolds watched the Montana landscape recede below them, her father's evidence secure in federal custody, his killers soon to face justice. The cycle that had begun in a Panamanian jungle 34 years earlier was finally approaching completion. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible above the helicopter's rotor wash. Harrison considered the question that had haunted him for 3 decades. Justice, he answered simply. Truth, accountability. The things your father fought for. The things worth protecting. Kate nodded, understanding that some battles transcended individual concerns. They were fought for principles that defined not just a soldier's duty, but a nation's character. 1 month later, Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The ceremony in the Pentagon's inner courtyard was deliberately low-key, no press, no politicians, just a gathering of soldiers honoring one of their own. James Harrison stood at parade rest, his Ranger dress uniform immaculate, despite having been stored for 34 years. Before him, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff read the formal declaration restoring Harrison's rank and honors, officially acknowledging that his actions in Panama had been consistent with the highest traditions of the United States Army. General William Hargrove was conspicuously absent, having been taken into custody 2 weeks earlier following a sealed federal indictment. The conspiracy he had maintained for decades had unraveled with surprising speed once federal prosecutors had Thomas Reynolds's meticulously documented evidence. Coup Twist 10. For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against hostile forces, the chairman continued, Staff Sergeant James Harrison distinguished himself while serving with the 2nd Battalion 75th Ranger Regiment during operations in Panama on December 20, 1989. Kate Reynolds watched from the front row, seated among the surviving members of the Delta team her father and Harrison had rescued. Michael Daniels sat beside her, his weathered face solemn as the long-delayed recognition unfolded. When informed that a Delta Force team was pinned down and in danger of being overrun with no extraction possible through official channels, Sergeant Harrison made the difficult decision to disobey direct orders, leading a volunteer squad to their position through hostile territory. The chairman paused, making eye contact with Harrison before continuing. Under intense enemy fire, he personally carried a wounded operator over 4 miles of jungle terrain while coordinating the extraction of 7 additional personnel. His actions saved 8 American lives at great personal risk, exemplifying the Ranger creed that no soldier be left behind. As the chairman completed the citation, he stepped forward to pin a second silver star beside the first on Harrison's chest, formal recognition of the heroism that had cost him his career, but saved 8 men. The United States Army acknowledges that Sergeant Harrison's subsequent discharge was not consistent with the facts of his service, nor with the Army values of loyalty, duty, and personal courage. His record has been amended to reflect an honorable discharge with full benefits restored retroactively. For Harrison, the formal recognition mattered less than the men seated before him, the Delta operators who had lived full lives because of his decision 34 years earlier. Their presence was the true validation of his choice in that Panamanian jungle. After the ceremony, as the gathering transitioned to a reception in one of the Pentagon's historic halls, Harrison found himself approached by a senior intelligence officer he didn't recognize. "Sergeant Harrison," the man greeted him, offering a hand. "Colonel James Mattingly, Defense Intelligence Agency. I was asked to give you this." He handed Harrison a sealed envelope. "It's from Thomas Reynolds. He left instructions that it be delivered to you if his evidence was ever activated." Harrison accepted the envelope with surprise. Even from beyond the grave, Thomas Reynolds continued to demonstrate his strategic foresight. Finding a quiet corner, Harrison opened the envelope to discover a brief handwritten note, "Iron Horse. If you're reading this, the truth has finally come to light. I've spent decades building the case, creating fail-safes, preparing for the day when justice would catch up to those who betrayed their oath. I never told you, but that night in Panama changed everything for me. Not just because you saved my life, but because you showed me what real courage looks like. The willingness to risk everything for what's right, regardless of the cost. I've asked Kate to join the Freedom Riders if anything happens to me. She has her mother's heart and my stubborn sense of justice. Together with Daniels, you'll teach her what I learned from you, that honor isn't found in medals or promotions, but in the choices we make when no one is watching. The road ahead won't be easy. Men like Hargrove don't fall without collateral damage. But the truth matters. It always has. Until Valhalla." Tom Harrison folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his uniform pocket as Kate approached. She had recovered fully from her wound, the experience having hardened her already formidable resolve. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting his expression. "Your father," Harrison replied simply. "Still 3 steps ahead, even now." Kate smiled, a gesture that momentarily transformed her serious features, revealing the spirit that had made Thomas Reynolds such a formidable ally and friend. "The Freedom Riders are gathering outside," she informed him. "Quite a sight. Hundreds of them lining the Pentagon perimeter. Daniel says they're waiting to escort you down Constitution Avenue." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Bit dramatic for an old soldier." "Not according to them," Kate countered. "They're calling it the Ride for Honor. Veterans from 30 states. Even some active duty military in civilian clothes." Word spread through the veterans' network after the story broke. The realization that his actions had resonated beyond the immediate circle of those he had saved humbled Harrison in a way that formal recognition had not. These were men who understood the weight of the oath, the meaning of sacrifice, the cost of standing on principle when easier paths presented themselves. Outside, the afternoon sun gleamed off hundreds of motorcycles arranged in military precision around the Pentagon's massive perimeter. As Harrison emerged from the building, a ripple of recognition passed through the assembled riders. Without command or signal, they rendered a silent salute, thousands of veterans acknowledging one of their own. Michael Daniels approached helmet in hand, indicating a gleaming Harley Road King waiting nearby. "Your ride, Sergeant," he said, a rare smile breaking through his normally stoic demeanor. "Unless you'd prefer to take the metro." Harrison shook his head, unable to completely suppress his own smile. "Subtle as always, Ghost." "Subtlety's overrated," Daniels replied. "Some things should make noise." As Harrison mounted the motorcycle, Kate took position on a second bike beside him. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Thomas Reynolds' daughter and the man who had saved him united in completing the mission he had begun. The engines started in sequence, creating a rolling thunder that echoed against the Pentagon's massive walls. The sound built to a crescendo as hundreds of motorcycles, Harleys, Indians, Victory cruisers, machines spanning decades of American manufacturing, roared to life in unified tribute. Harrison led the formation onto Washington's historic avenues, Kate and Daniels flanking him, the Freedom Riders following in perfect military formation. As they proceeded down Constitution Avenue, pedestrians stopped to watch the unprecedented procession, a river of chrome and leather flowing through the heart of the Capitol. At the Lincoln Memorial, Harrison brought the formation to a halt. The riders arranged themselves in a semicircle, engines falling silent, as veterans dismounted to render a final salute to the fallen, those who had died in Panama, those who had been silenced, protecting the truth, and Thomas Reynolds, whose determination had ultimately ensured justice would prevail. In that moment of solemn recognition, James Harrison finally felt the weight of 34 years lifting from his shoulders. The long exile had ended. The truth had emerged. Justice delayed, but not denied, had finally arrived, like distant thunder rolling across the Montana sky. As the sun set behind the Washington Monument, casting long shadows across the mall, Harrison reflected on Thomas Reynolds' final message. Honor wasn't found in ceremonies or public recognition. It lived in the quiet choices made when principles collided with expedience, when doing right carried a personal cost, when the oath to defend transcended orders to retreat. Some debts could never be fully repaid. Some wounds never completely healed. But standing among hundreds of veterans who understood sacrifice without explanation, Harrison recognized that the long road from Panama had always been leading here, not to vindication or restoration, but to the simple recognition that honor, like thunder, might fall silent for a time, but would eventually make itself heard. The evidence was secure, the conspiracy exposed, the fallen remembered, the mission, at long last, complete. Thunder Road had delivered justice after all.